Hello, hello, hello. If you can see us, if you can hear us, please do let us know, because otherwise, how are we going to know?
I don't know. Bonjour and guten tag. I am delighted to be here for the stream that I thought was going to be happening last week because I'm an idiot. And I actually advertised it all going, oh, we're about to do. No, we're not doing this at all. Because, of course, it's happening this week because we were bribed.
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of that always kind of being thrown around, which is excellent. You know, it's not something we ever say. No, we would basically, we would always fail our stupidity check when it comes to Greasus.
Yeah, funny. Yeah, we were bribed rather appropriately for Greasus Goldtooth. Somebody said, I'd really like to have Greasus Goldtooth. Was it Darius? It was Darius, wasn't it, Darius? I think it was Darius. I'm going to have to go back and check because it was so long ago I've now forgotten, because it was their birthday coming the end of this month. And they said, could you? And we were like, yeah, well, maybe, you know. And then they super chatted it to hell. And we were like, oh, okay, fair enough. You have thrown a lot of money in our direction. Let's do it. Happy birthday! So today is Happy Birthday Day. And of course, we have been properly bribed to do a Greasus stream. Personally, I'm really looking forward to this one, not just because Greasus is pretty awesome as a character, he is, but because I have a pretty controversial take. Now, it's not that controversial. It's a take that I think most of you will say, no, that makes sense. But some of you might go, no, fuck off, that's nonsense. Let's see. We'll have that come out through the course of this stream.
Yep. But, I mean, I feel like, you know, if we're doing Lorebeards, if you don't feel, if there isn't at least one person in the world that looks at the show and goes, nope, this is stupid, this is bullshit, you both can fuck right off, then we're not doing our jobs right.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, this one doesn't, as you'll find out, Greasus doesn't have a great deal of literature dedicated to him. He's not one of those characters that have been around since the beginning of Warhammer and has been rewritten and overwritten and rewritten again. Greasus has been relatively consistent in his relatively short life. However, what little we do have provides us with just enough to go, And I do like those moments where on Lorebeards we go, you know, so yeah, I'm looking forward to this one quite a lot. Yes, it was you, Darius. Thanks for. I'm just going to bring it up because I was pretty sure it was Darius.
Man, look at you and your memory. You're doing so good.
Yeah, Darius, you absolutely kick ass. Thank you very much for choosing the topic for today, and thank you very much for bribing us, because anyone who supports the channel always gets my support in return. Thank you.
Yeah, and yeah, it helped that like I really didn't want to do the back-to-back of like Sail into Village, who ended up winning the poll. Because it was kind of like those two are very similar in a lot of different ways. So this added like a big fat topic in the middle of it.
Yeah, and it's a good one too. As characters go, Greasus offers something relatively new for Warhammer, and we'll discuss that as we get into it. I say relatively new. We're talking the length of Warhammer as a whole, not in terms of how old the character is, because he's now a pretty aged character as far as Warhammer is concerned.
Yeah, he definitely has been around for a solid minute from, well, depends on your perspective.
It does. From my perspective, he's still a new guy.
Okay, let's get started with some early super chats, and then we will get into it.
Sounds good to me. Let's go.
Darius got the Burger King crown out. Can't wait to hear about one of my childhood heroes. John Cena, Pee Wee Herman, or the others. You know, it sounds like
interesting mix.
Yeah. Yes, and we all know that just like John Cena and Pee Wee Herman, Greasus Goldtooth is also beloved by children everywhere. Great role model to have. He really is. Skara, prepare for Trade Lord, Greasus, Tribe Stealer, Drake Crush, Gate Crasher, Horde Master, Goldtooth, the shockingly obese, the biggest, strongest ogre around. He really does kind of have like a full wrestling title.
Oh, he 100% does. And given how much ogre culture focuses upon the pit and pit fighting, it sort of makes sense. I really like it.
Yeah, it was funny. I was doing some just refreshing last night, working my way through some of the various ogre books, just to make sure I didn't miss anything. And it cracked me up how I didn't realize in notably the 8th edition book, they snuck in so many goofy ass references to like, oh, this term is actually like originally from the ogres. Like they have this whole thing about like, yeah, the phrase "it'll cost an arm and a leg" is from ogre culture because they'll rip off your limbs during a negotiation, and it's just settled into the old world. Or an army marches on its stomach, originally an ogre phrase. And I was like, this shit's hilarious. I miss this. This is great.
Yeah, it is good.
Tyrant. To celebrate the greatest of all ogres, Andy and Ryan cuts out pit fight.
You're going to need to do a far bigger super chat than that, Tyrant, for it ever to happen. Yeah, at the very least, you'd have to pay for plane fares.
Yeah, that's the thing that's going to kill us the most by far.
Oh yeah, especially with the current prices. Yeah, my daughter's currently planing around the UK because of various other cancellations, and not cheap.
Yeah, around here, I think it's maybe starting to restore slowly, but it's been apparently pretty bad. I'm really glad I haven't had to fly anywhere else.
Yeah, me too.
Darius, Greasus, Ryan, Andy, Lorebeards, acknowledge me.
Oh, extra.
Oh, and Darius, even more extra.
Wow.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman. Okay, there it is. See, the problem is, hold on.
You gonna go with that one? Go.
I'm gonna try. Here we go. I'm still like, okay, here we go. Introducing the reigning, defending, undisputed, the Tribe Stealer, the Drake Crush, the Gate Crusher, the Horn Master, the War Crusher, the Master of the Stinking World, the Tribal Chief, Greasus Goldtooth. There you go.
Yeah, it's so appropriate. Love it.
It is. Manlight Pegasus, can you explain briefly, I will add, the ice magic of the Yetis, the Thunder Tusks, and the Mom? Is it connected / similar to the Kislev and or Ulrich ice magic? Why can't normal ogres use ice magic? Okay, so I'm going to take a quick whack at this. Good luck. So, in Warhammer, there are a lot of different types of elemental magics, is the simplest way we'll put it. And many of them will appear to be of a similar type, of that you will have a lot of fire magics or earth magics or wind magics, or in this case, ice magics. And I will note that just because they appear similar does not mean they necessarily are by any stretch of the imagination. There is a whole note about that the ancient giant lands and a lot of the top highest peaks of the mountains of Morn and those various mountain ranges were coated in warpstone dust and all sorts of magic due to the crashing of the warpstone meteor that was the Great Maw. And due to it, it caused weird things to happen up in those places.
Dandar Hills.
Yeah. And to the point that many of the ogres, when they initially settled in those higher peaks, were like, it feels weird here. The air tingles odd and all this is strange. We're getting out of here. And they kept moving west and settled into the valleys over in the Mountains of Morn. So, and when you read about the Mountains of Morn, you can really get those vibes of that. It's a really, really magical place. There's a whole bunch of stuff about how the land itself is alive, and the ogres have fought against living glaciers that come to life and attack them, or mountains that are vaguely sentient, and a bunch of other crazy nonsense. And you have things about like how fire bellies are imbued with power and belief from a living volcano god. It is a land that is saturated in what we would understand as like magic and spirits and gods and a bunch of other nonsense. And the ice is merely a part of that ecosystem. In the case of like the Yetis and the Thunder Tusk and all that stuff.
Cut a long story short, because it is a potentially long one given the nature of how magic works. There are multiple different versions of magic that look similar that aren't. And is it similar to Ulrich? No. Divine. Similar to Kislev? No. That's very much the magic of Kislev. But does it look similar? Often, yes, because it's drawing upon similar things. But then you could say that many magics that create fire or the appearance of fire look the same, even though some of them won't be using actually. Much of the shaman wind, causes melting metals and fire to burst up in great big gouts of, strangely enough, fire, but it has nothing to do with actually. So somewhat similarly, different magics work in different ways all over the place.
Yeah.
That's about it, really.
But if you, running like a campaign, wanted to suggest that there is a connecting thread tying all those things together, you could run with that, and you could probably make it work really easily.
Oh, yeah. Definitely.
I would say it was not the intent.
It's the sort of nonsense that I do for my campaigns, where I just go, hey, all these things look similar. What if they were all the same? Let's make that work.
Yeah, and the biggest reason regular ogres can't use icy type magic is because they don't live and they don't have an affinity or relationship with the icy type areas. That's what the Yetis are. The Yetis are literally a offshoot of the ogres that were mutated by that icy domain. Biofoot. Can Greasus buy a chunk of meat so large even he can't eat it all? Or is he too poor? Why hasn't he paid a big bounty to eat Kraken Rock the Black? So, first of all, I love your pulling out the god paradox of gotta create something so big you can't lift it. Greasus could definitely, I think, not buy a chunk of meat so large he can't eat it all, because as we're going to talk about this stream, Greasus canonically can eat a pretty horrific amount of stuff in a single sitting. I think it would be more likely for him to run out of money before he would run out of the ability to gorge. But we'll see. So you could say he's too poor, but he's only just getting started. He's only maybe, well, we'll get into it, but he's only like probably in his 60s or 80s. He's got a long way to go.
I have some discussion about that, because I think you're right, but I think that they're pitching him as something different.
Yeah, very, very likely. Stephen Lucas, given how dangerous Warhammer Fantasy is, should the Ivory Road have a relay trade like the IRL Silk Road? Call it safe and unload on the next trader or Greasus' boys, or bite the bolter shell for greed with a round trip?
So I think that there will be some of this. It's going to be a mixture of those great trains that Cathay runs that are very much not going to be doing the relay run. They're going to be going from edge right through to edge because they want to hold all of the profits for themselves. But there's also going to be a whole host of different groups who are going to be doing quick relay runs, taking goods from one point to the next, taking on a much smaller danger in an area that they understand completely, because they're just working backwards and forwards across, say, a 100, 200 mile section. So I think both is going to be the case, not just one. And I think if you're building it for the roleplay game and you want to build your own version of the Ivory Road, I would suggest using as many different versions as you can think of, because if there's profit to be made, people are going to give it a go. And if there's a more secure way of doing profit, people are going to give that a go as well. So it's going to be constantly changing and adapting according to the local circumstances and what they can get off with. But this, I think, is definitely going to be a thing.
Yeah, especially when looking at something like the Ivory Road, which is so painfully, you could almost say, inspired by like our world's history and like and especially the mythos that would have been around at the time for the Silk Road. Back then, I'm sure there would have been. I've never done detailed research on what people at the time thought of it, but I'm sure there were a lot of myths and made up nonsense about what you could experience or run into as you journeyed down that path. And there were probably a lot of mythical things that were invoked surrounding that. But all that aside, yeah, I think that taking some of the real world historical things of how that would have functioned and all that stuff is a really, really good idea.
Yep. Agreed. Yep.
Mr. Pig, getting my old Metal Chaos Ogre command ready for my Mordheim campaign. So This is perfect listening while I do so.
Nice.
God, could you have a whole squad of Chaos Ogres for Mordheim? That sounds terrifying. One ogre I could expect. Magladroth, if Age of Sigmar is truly ending, I imagine Andy is the one to do it and frame Gelt for the crime and blackmail Ryan to help out. Also, Lorebeards could take over GW. Remember, we don't have that kind of, yeah, we don't have. I wish we had that kind of capital. I really wish we did, but we don't.
Me too. We do not.
Andy hasn't been here since the rumors have hit the rumors that are looking more and more true. I will admittedly say, it definitely seems likely that Sigmar is going to be dying sometime in the next 2 years. But that's at least a year or two from now. So we are not a rumor channel, I will say, and we will deal with that. Well, I say that, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. That's how I'll put it.
Yeah, I discussed it very briefly in the Q&A I did on Saturday, and to reply in a similar stance, I'll take whatever comes, and I do think that killing him off is a good thing.
Niestra of Dawn. Jesus, thank you so much. That is incredibly generous.
Thank you.
Very generous. Afternoon, boys. I had been playing Warhammer since 4th edition. I was wondering, is it possible to do a what if Krell, when he was alive, defeated the dwarfs? And what would have happened before Sigmar? Or if there's not that much info around that time, then what if Krell had killed Sigmar when he was undead? Those are both.
Yeah, let's add on those. So, Nastra, the answer to that is a clear thank you very much for bribing us. It is a Goldtooth episode. It seems appropriate, and I'm taking the bribe. So, yeah, let's do that. I particularly like the what if Krell defeated the dwarves, or just what if Krell won. Or, to keep it really simple, what if Krell won rather than losing? And I think there could be a really interesting story in that. We've discussed it in the past concerning potential Everchosen and more. So I think that would be a super fun one. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually fully agree.
Also, just as a general comment, thank you very much for bribing us. Super thankful.
Always deeply appreciate it. Especially, that's a very generous bribe too. You could have gotten away with a lot less if you had wanted. Joe Numbers, good morning from work, gentle beards. Thank you.
Good morning, Joe Numbers. Looking forward to getting into this stream.
Magladroth, if a major chaos god were to leave the side of chaos during / before the end times, what would be the repercussions and which god would fall to chaos to replace? That's a lot of assumptions. It would be my initial response.
Right, so the repercussions would be not as big as you think. Which god would fall to replace? I mean, it's almost certainly Slaanesh that's not going to be the one that takes the fight. Slaanesh has always been the edge case, probably edging as well, being who Slaanesh is. As to which god would fall to replace, we don't need to have a chaos god to fall to replace. There's already more than enough to deal with and end times with what's already there. But if you desperately wish to choose one, the obvious one would be the Horned Rat and running with an earlier version of the tale that's told in Age of Sigmar.
Yeah. Gnivel. Moot Rebellion ended by a stalemate with Feastmasters occupying the Moot. So is the Moot basically a independent ogre kingdom as of the end times?
Not really, no. That's the whole point of stalemate. No. But they are most certainly working together in that particular instance.
Man like Pegasus, can you explain Bragg? Why does Greasus allow him to murder ogres / exist? Is he some sort of avatar of Shaish that appears / wanders a la Nakai / Gromberdo? Okay, so Bragg the Gutsman, for anyone that doesn't know, is a really big, nasty ogre that wears a executioner. He wears a big old slab of leather style like an executioner's hood, and he's got this big sickle on a chain that he walks around with that's attached to a pole, and he murders the hell out of people. But a big aspect of his lore is that other ogres find him rather uncomfortable to be around, to the point that he isn't really welcome due to the nature of how he kills people, which is
I'm going to contradict that slightly, because his description's quite clear that he's always welcomed, always, wherever he goes.
What I was going to add is that
not necessarily welcome.
He's kind of an ogre that when ogres hear he's coming, they're like, oh, Bragg the Gutsman's coming. Bragg the Gutsman. This guy is like crazy strong. He wins all these cool fights and stuff. And then when he does show up, they see how he fights, which, to put it very simply, his technique is basically being a living can opener to other ogres, where he has figured out a very clever technique where he's able to sort of flick his magical weapon at people, and it hooks around their gut plate and then like carves around it so that all of their intestines pop out, which is, for ogres, a horrible, horrible, horrible way to watch someone die. Ogres, it's funny. It's actually, I love his story because it shows the ogres being squeamish about something, which they're often described as being like unshakable, but the way Bragg kills other ogres makes them go, ah! So because of that, it's not that he's never banished. He's never like kicked out. It's just nobody really likes hanging out with him. They kind of ignore him and treat him as a very uncomfortable individual. So he just kind of feels left out, and he goes, all right, I guess I'll move on. They're like, yeah, that sounds great. See you, man. And then he leaves.
Yeah, I mean, basically, he's just another ogre who wanders around challenging some of the best fighters that exist amongst the other tribes, and sometimes winning. The interesting part of this question, man, like Pegasus, is why does Greasus allow him to murder ogres? Because that's ogre culture.
Yeah,
that's how they work. They're constantly fighting each other, constantly challenging. And the arrival of him is seen as something potentially great, because it's the arrival of, to run with the theme that was already put in place by Darius, of a great wrestlers arrived in town, and all their wrestlers come out. Okay, they have themselves a big, massive fight down in one of the pits, and everyone's super excited because they might see one of their champions who have bullied most of the people in their own communities a lot, and they might get killed. Yay! They get very excited about a big scrap, and then they see how he does it, and they're like, that's just not on, and you're not even eating him. This is weird. Dude, what are you doing? You're fighting it wrong. And they're all like, I'm not so sure I want to talk to you anymore. But that doesn't change the nature of his story to the ogres, because ogres love a big bellies out tail, and the big belly out tail here is he kills champions, and that makes them super excited. He's basically the Undertaker amongst the ogres, in that he's a wrestling champion who has so far managed to win all of his bouts. So pretty simple.
Yep. The Singemeister. What if Daughters of Cain all had Valley Girl accents? It would definitely it would subvert my expectations. But in many cases of subverting expectations, I don't think it would necessarily be the right decision. Darius, me watching the Manosphere, who are obviously in the closet, I don't believe in that Sigma nonsense. Me reading and about Greasus crushing a black orc war boss into toothpaste with a hug. Let's go! Necroplayer, I love fun, dumb comparisons. Who had a harder time, Goldtooth introducing gold to ogres, or Thorgrim getting gyrocopters okayed by the dwarfs?
Thorgrim.
Yeah, Thorgrim definitely had a much harder time than Greasus did. We'll definitely talk significantly about that in today's stream. Of Greasus did have a task ahead of him. He did accomplish something pretty impressive, but we will get to that. Good Lord, Darius, you are going nuts today.
And thanks, Darius. Yeah, and happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday, my dude. Funny, if you look at Brock Lesnar now, wrestler / UFC fighter, he basically looks like Greasus.
I mean,
it's a little rude. I imagine that's what he would look like if human. Possibly, very possibly, yes. Poor Brock Lesnar catching strays at Lorebeards. Necroplayer, I'm excited to learn about the rich sugar daddy boyfriend of my #1 favorite dragon. Honest to goodness, one of my favorite things that Total War added. Greasus got some really fun bits from Total War, which is great. Spartan. In Perilous Quest, the Bretonnians faced off with the Wood Elves in a joust that affected their interspecies relationship. Is there any other example of jousts affecting relationships or relations with other races?
So going back, I remember Perilous Quest coming out and this whole thing being a thing. It was justifying much of the story inside Perilous Quest. And when they did the jousting rules in White Dwarf, they basically just focused on Bretonnians with a small side smattering of, Empire and others joining in too. I can't think of one where jousting became a focus of interspecies relations. Inter-faction relations, definitely. The Empire and Bretonnia often used martial displays of one type or another to not necessarily resolve disputes, but most certainly bring everyone together where they can resolve disputes around the great event. And that's the case for almost all of the various realms of the old world, where jousting has become a core component of noble activity, in the same way that pit fighting from the ogres has become a core component of most lower class fighting styles. And you get pits, which are originated all the way from the ogre kingdoms through Tilia, and then from Tilia across the old world. So I can't think of one off the top of my head. There might be one, and if anyone knows one out there in the comments, do drop it in so that we can go, oh yeah, that.
I would not be surprised. I will say I wouldn't be surprised if with like how
high elves.
Yeah, high elves. Especially with how old world is very heavily interweaving high elves and Bretonnian culture. We might get a story like this. But it'll probably just kind of like show up in a random timeline.
High elves are the most likely area, probably.
Garrett 007. If an ogre only eats greenskins, does that make him a vegetarian?
Sadly, no. But from an ogre perspective, it's the closest they're probably going to get.
That would definitely be the. I could see that being an argument amongst ogres, which would be very funny. Swarjaj. At long last, we have a Greasus episode. Can't wait for Overtyrants and Age of Sigmar. The heirs of Greasus Goldtooth must rise. Ogre kingdoms for the old world. Bring back the Overtyrant for AOS. Just everywhere. Just Overtyrant. Everywhere you could stuff them. I agree. Overall, very much so. Though, interestingly, granted, they probably wouldn't, but if Games Workshop was going to keep things lore accurate, there very well could either just be an Overtyrant who's about to die in the old world, or there might just not be an Overtyrant during the time of the old world, because Greasus is the first one in well over a century.
Yep.
So, yeah. The Exile one. Does Greasus wear a gut plate? No. And we will discuss that because that's really important.
It is.
And then Slushy Raccoon. Okay, we'll go until the 30, and then we got to get going. Slushy Raccoon. Do ogre mothers have to protect their kids from other ogres during times of famine? Likely. Probably yes.
One of the issues with the ogre kingdoms is, whilst we got a good insight into their society because they were building it from the ground up, I'll get into that when I move into the intro, they don't cover really anything that's not important to the battle game. And we don't really get a strong idea of whether men or women ogres are responsible for this and how it's worked, whether the baby ogres come out pretty much fighting guts out right from the beginning, a little bit more like gazelles who can run within minutes of being born, or whether they're more like human babies, which means they are shit for a good few years, incapable of looking after themselves. That's not covered. Given the nature of their society, you would think, well, surely they're going to be capable from the beginning, but I think that's not the case, because they're an old one generated species, and what they became is not what the old ones initially built. So it's much more likely they're like halflings, which means that they have a good number of years where their babies, their young baby ogres, are incapable of properly protecting themselves, which means that there's going to have to be probably maternal and maybe paternal protection of these babies. You might find it's a tribal imperative to look after the children for the next generation. You might find that it's not parents who look after them, it's the older ogres who've survived longer, or perhaps younger ogres who've yet to prove themselves. It's their job to look after the tribe's next generation. There's lots of different ways that this could be tackled, but as it currently stands, it's not really tackled. I would say less make it ogre mothers, because that's just classic human-based gender stereotyping, and instead say that ogre communities have to protect their kids. Yes, they do. And not just from other ogres, but from the horrible, harsh environments that ogres find themselves living in. The elements alone for much of the ogre kingdoms are enough to kill most. So they're going to have to be protected. And food is going to have to be shared out to these younger ogres. Plus, you know, they got spiky teeth, so I can't imagine breastfeeding those bastards is going to be fun.
Yeah, no.
It actually suggests that for the first 2 or 3 years, the ogre teeth don't grow in at all, to ensure that, and when the teeth come in, that's when the mothers chuck them out and say, nope, no more, because that would hurt.
Yeah, literally the only thing we know about ogre babies literally just revolves around like the gorgers and the butchers, but they're both very extreme examples. And the gorger babies that will become gorgers are quite literally described as being like, they just move around the cave floor just grabbing at random things, and due to their size they're able to like capture and eat things, and they're better at hiding. But then the warp stone, because there's so much warp stone underneath the mountains of Morin, changes them very, very quickly into something other.
And large numbers of them die when young as well. It's worth noting that they are not properly protected, and they die. So that also suggests something about the other ogres and what would happen if they weren't protected.
Mm-hmm. Sir Panza, I can't wait to see how capitalism was the true evil the whole time. It always is.
It always is. I mean, we know that. It just is.
All right, and at that point, we got to put a pause in super chats because we got to get going.
We got to get going. We've already hit approximately half past. That's more than enough time for us to take a settle down. I won't do too long an intro, given that we've got quite a lot that we'd like to cover today. But I'm going to go to a couple of places. I'm going to start all the way back in the early 2000s. At this point, Games Workshop is moving from 5th into 6th edition of Warhammer. They're moving from the old Hero Hammer into the complete rework of all Warhammer, from the ground up down to the bottom of Warhammer Fantasy Battle and how it's pitched. They rebalance every single army. They redo everything. And at this point, Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st edition is the only roleplay game available for Warhammer. And I was getting dissatisfied by this point, because I've been playing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay for, by that point, almost 20 years. Is it 20 years? Yeah, almost, not quite, but 15 years. And the 1st edition of the game had completely fallen behind what Warhammer offered. And I wanted a game that gave me all the cool shit from Warhammer, like ogres, like Chaos Dwarves, none of which were in the 1st edition of the Fantasy Roleplay. So I was in the process of writing my own game. It was called Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay Andy Edition, because, hey, I was that kind of guy. This is before Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition was even announced. And I was halfway through writing this. So I was at approximately 150,000 words. And I was super pleased with where it was going. Unlike any fantasy roleplay game before it just used 6-sided dice, because it was going to be a roleplay game for Warhammer, and Warhammer Fantasy Battle also used 6-sided dice. I basically made a roleplay game that reflected the complete spectrum of what Warhammer was. I was in a very happy place. And then, at the end of 2004, some announcements started getting made from Games Workshop on their website. They were going to do something that they hadn't done for a very, very long time. They were going to create a new army. Now, the arrival of a new army in Warhammer was always a significant and big event. And the last time this had really happened was all the way back in 5th edition, when they tried to rebuild the Chaos Dwarves, and they did it in White Dwarf. And that army crashed and burned. No other way of putting it. It did not sell well at all. And there was a general feeling that from this point onwards, Warhammer Fantasy Battle was just going to repeat the same armies again and again, finish them off, start a new edition. rebuild them all, start a new edition. And we all knew what those armies are going to be. Your high elves, your dark elves, your empire, maybe your wood elves if they could bother getting round to it, maybe Bretonnians if they could bother getting round to it, chaos, Skaven. We know what the core races are. And then out came the announcement, we're doing ogres. And it was exciting because something new was getting made for Warhammer. And very quickly, they started describing what they were doing with the ogres. And the ogres that they were adding were completely unlike anything that we had seen for ogres before. Ogres before that were basically big, slightly dumb humans that ate a lot of food and called most of the other species slim or something similar. They were a joke species. Exactly. A joke species that had been used extensively in games like Blood Bowl, because they could throw wee guys, which is super fun, and throwing those little guys around. And they'd got more culture written into Blood Bowl than they had done really in Warhammer or Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. Ogres were just basically big joke characters. And I was intending on using ogres as one of my playable species in my new version of Andy Edition Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So I was super excited to see what they were doing. And the art started arriving. The articles started discussing what they were. And I was like, holy shit, ogres are changing a lot. Back in the 6th edition version, they were super Mongol coded, as in real world Mongolia, with long, thin mustaches, dark hair hanging down, but big, huge, monstrous versions of them. And I remember going, hey, they're basically saying Mongols, and it's always Mongols with Games Workshop. Anytime they go east, they go, hey, they're just like Mongols. Take a look at Kislev, take a look at Ostland, take a look at the Hobgoblins, take a look at basically anything that could potentially be in the east. They go, Mongols, Mongols, because everybody's got a hard-on for Mongols over in the UK, and the Great Mongol Horde and the Golden Horde making its way across not just Asia, but Europe too. How freaking exciting. We want to copy that into Warhammer. It shows basically a massive hole in their historical knowledge about every other culture that did exist over in those areas. But basically, we got giant man-eating Mongols who were entirely, and I do mean entirely, obsessed by that old description from Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 1st edition and 3rd edition Warhammer, their hungers. And they concentrated on this and worked on them all. And I got really, really excited when a single article got popped up onto Games Workshop's website where it went, hey, you know the ogres? We're now going to discuss not just what we're going to add in terms of their new culture, we're going to discuss where they came from. And I was like, oh, holy shit. And Phil Kelly, as I recall, wrote this article. He was getting interviewed. And because Phil Kelly was doing the writing for the army list. And they said, hey, dude, what's the story here? And to sum it all up, he said, halflings and ogres are basically the same. They're the same species, but in two different forms, made by the old ones. And this is why they made them. They were made right at the very end, anti-chaos. They were designed to do this particular thing. And I'm like, holy shit, they're really going to town and figuring out what they're doing with these new ogres. I'm excited! And of course, eventually they arrived at the start of next year, 2005. For those of you who were in the chat going, hey, it's been since 2004. No, that's when the copyright notice is in the book. It didn't release until 2005, January at the beginning of the year. I remember it because I was first in the queue to buy that motherfucker because I wanted to see what they were doing with it. And I loved it. So much so that I immediately incorporated everything it offered, everything, the new cultures, the way the gut plates were used, the way they had their big names, the way they used their runes as some form of language, the glyph system that they had, the fact that they had a complete lack of deeper imagination, but completely excelled in a whole host of relatively cunning, clever adaptions of how to hunt and survive in the wild. The great story of where they come from, the birth of them all of it was in the 6th edition. The 6th edition book basically did a lot of work to build an entire culture. And it was one of those rare books where they managed to pretty much nail an entire new faction in a single book and let you understand it. I loved it. In that book was, of course, Greasus Goldtooth. Now, I'm not going to discuss my first opinion of Greasus Goldtooth because someone else did it for me. Because I was in Games Workshop on the day of its release. Back then it was called Games Workshop, not the Warhammer store. And I was in Games Workshop. And the new army list was there. And I was picking it up going, excellent. I'll go pick this up. I'm going to buy it. I'm looking forward to bringing this into my new version of Warhammer. And a kid was there with his mum. And he pulled it open. And he was reading his way through it. And he was like, oh, look at this, look at this. And the mother was humoring him. Mother was going, yeah, I'm sure it's very exciting, darling. Yeah, sure. A slightly upper middle class Edinburgh mother who was giving her son the thing that she wanted that day, and he reached Greasus Goldtooth. This kid was probably about 10 or 11, and the kid went, Greasus Goldtooth, that's a stupid name. First thing, and the mother looked in and went, what's his name? And he said, Greasus Goldtooth. And she went, what, is he greasy and just wants money? And then here's the comment that I'm going to say and not mention again. Well, this sounds like a Jewish stereotype. Mm-hmm. And the kid went, oh, like I'm studying in school just now. And I went, I don't like this at all. A greasy, money-grubbing stereotype. That's not cool. And then the parent went off. Yeah, totally. The parent went off discussing it with his kid, basically deconstructing Greasus Goldtooth and how it was a truly terrible name. But they read the character, and the mother, bless her soul, went, oh, that's horribly disgusting. I really like that. At least it doesn't appear to completely, match the stereotype that I thought this was going to be. And I was like, holy moly, wow. Interesting conversation to listen into. But I thought not the same thing, because I didn't immediately latch onto that. Warhammer has long had its issues with stereotypes being brought up one way or another. And most of those stereotypes were carefully ironed out by about the 6th edition. By this point, it was very much doing its own thing. But I had to agree with one thing that they had said, and that was, it was a bad name. Greasy Goldtooth. I mean, that's his name. Now, we are used to it. And now, several years later, I don't think about this, but that story is lodged in my memory, and I think it's worth bringing up, just so that we can try to remember the first time that it came out and some initial opinions of it. And it was, this name is actually a bad name, particularly because none of them speak anything close to English. None of them. So Greasus means nothing. They speak Grumbarth. They've got their own language. So Greasus means nothing other than what we give to it. And it's almost a joke name. And it's a relatively bad, greasy, money-grubbing joke name that does bring up some relatively uncomfortable stereotypes that I didn't notice when I read it first, but apparently a mum did in Edinburgh. So the character itself was great. I loved the character. And I immediately, upon reading it, went, there's something in here. I'm not going to discuss it now because we're going to get to it later. And I went, there's something in here. I sense conspiracy. I sense proper conspiracy here. I kind of like this. And I went off and I took these new ogres, including Greasus, who I didn't rename, although I have renamed a few characters in Warhammer in some of my games in the past because their names were just so bad. I kept his name, Greasus, and I used him in a couple of my games. But of course, as we reached halfway through the year, Games Workshop then announced they're doing Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition. So I threw out everything that I was writing because fuck that, if someone else was going to do all the work, I could do something else. And 2nd edition came along and didn't include ogres. I was relatively upset about that, so I wrote an ogre supplement for that edition of the game. And pretty much from that point onwards, there was a tension in the roleplay game and the battle game. They all focused on loosely the same thing, and that was, could ogres be, and I know this was going to sound ridiculous given where ogres end up going, could ogres ever be used in the Empire army like they used to be? Because then the old Empire army, ogres were a core troop back in the 4th edition of the game. You could have ogres in it. Are there any ogres in the Empire? And if we go by the 6th edition, you can happily and easily go, no, they're fucking monsters. They're monsters. They eat anything, including your babies, your husbands, your wives, your children, anything else in their path. These are never going to be wandering around the Empire being happy-go-Larry ogre types that we had before. This is not going to happen. But over the course of time, this eroded as an idea. And I felt it was necessary because if we take a look at what Greasus is, which we're going to do soon, it's discussing the whole concept of integration that became a core aspect of who ogres are as they spread across the world, particularly when you take a look at the man-eaters, which for all man-eaters are almost nowadays completely sunk into what ogres are. Exceedingly new concept for the ogres, exceedingly so. For all that what lies behind it and what ogres are isn't. Now, we don't need to discuss man-eaters today because we'll be discussing Greasus in total. But it is
go watch our Goldtooth Man-Eater stream if you want more on Man-Eaters.
Yeah, go watch that stream because we sort of covered it all there. Now, with all that done, we then move into 7th edition, and I was very intrigued to see where they were going to update the ogres, because the ogres of 6th edition were isolationist and pretty much stuck in one part of the world. And it was far away from the rest of the old world. And they kind of didn't, because 7th edition didn't do anything with the ogres. And we were just left with the 6th edition version of them. So we head into the 8th. And in 8th edition, they got quite a big splash and an update. Greasus is copy-pasted over. He gets almost no new details. But what they do is they detail quite a bit of the important deeds of Greasus in that book. And they discuss some of the battles, which we're going to go onto in this stream as well. Yeah. And that helped to establish him as the preeminent ogre of his era. But they also did something else in this edition. If we go back to the 6th edition version, there's a pretty big black and white image of Greasus, and it's pretty awesome. Really awesome. He's lying there being Greasus Goldtooth. He hasn't got his crown on, and that's possibly a problem. But he does have all the rest. Yeah. And it's possibly a problem that I'll get onto later. I'm sure we're going to be covering it. But we get a really good idea. He is an enormous, obese ogre.
It's genuinely some of his best art.
He's lying there and lying down in reclined. He's as tall and as big as standing ogres about him. He is fucking huge. It's enormous ogre. Greasus Goldtooth is, there he is. Look at him. Okay, lounging there. Okay, as people are giving him tribute. And that's just brilliant. It's a lovely image of who Greasus is and what he is. But take one look at him now, because this is what he was as 6th edition. And his beard is black. His hair is black. Why? Because he's a relatively young ogre who has managed in very little time to do something that no other ogre has done for a very long time. He has bound together most, not really all, most of the ogre kingdoms under his rule. And he is so brazen, he doesn't even wear a gut plate. Protecting the fundamentals of who they are. He doesn't even need one. He is that awesome. And he is an impressive ogre. This piece of art, you could say, well, this looks like almost any ogre, really. You're not wrong. It sort of does. But what it doesn't quite convey to the same depth is just how big he is. When you see him standing, he is enormous in comparison to everyone around him. He is a big ogre. And I loved it. But when the 8th edition came along, and along came the miniature, they painted him with a white beard, making him look almost like Santa Claus. And this amused me deeply. And it amused me deeply for one reason that I couldn't shake. And that's that the Warhammer store in Edinburgh at that point was run by a chap called Baz. And Baz, there we go. There we go. Santa.
There's his Total War art, which is great. It's very nice piece of art.
Okay, but he's definitely become Santa. And we can't go there. But Baz, who used to run the local store, then moved down to run Warhammer World, and I believe is still in Warhammer World. He was my member of staff ages ago. Baz is a big guy. So all the miniatures of Greasus Goldtooth were painted like him in his store, with Baz written on it often. And he had a white beard also. And I still swear that's why it bled through. Obviously, it won't be that. But he was down in Warhammer the World. And if you go down to Warhammer World, there's always a Greasus Goldtooth there because it's Baz. So if you ever visit and you see the Greasus Goldtooth, it's because their manager, Baz. That's him. I discussed it with Baz at the time, and I found it hilarious. And like Baz was like, "Oh, my staff member did this, and it's fucking great." And I'm like, "No, that is absolutely amazing." Because Baz is a big guy, like my dad was a big guy. So I was amused to see that he had gone from being this almost upstart, this extraordinarily big, powerful, huge gutted ogre, and huge guts means a lot to ogre culture. The bigger your gut, the bigger you are, the more that you have killed, the more impressive you are. And any ogre meeting him would go, holy crap. And the newer version, as they presented it, as he's getting curved around, started moving more towards the humor side rather than the terrifying side that we had before. Now, the Ogre Kingdom's army list made the Ogre Kingdoms a far more open place, far more open to trade, and also far more open to spreading off across the world, which I really liked. It made the ogres a much more useful species and also better for incorporating into fantasy roleplay, which always makes me smile. And Greasus was almost the perfect character for us to focus on to see that, because he had converted all of the ogres to his way of thinking, which was gold, gold, trade, trade, and gold. The accumulation of gold and trading with outsiders, not warring with them. Binding all the ogres together under the idea of trade. And this is arguably one of Greasus's defining traits. He takes a species that is rapacious and monstrous and terrible and turns it into one that is still all of those things, but you can deal with them. And there is a common source of trade to deal with them beyond just wheeling in an entire field's worth of cows and saying, please eat these and not us. And Greasus is a great character. And by this point, I'm like, yeah, love him. I'm using him all over the place. And then we hit Total War. And Total War does two things. One, it adds a whole bunch of extra cool storylines, which we'll be discussing later, particularly concerning a certain dragon. But it also turns him, if anything, into an even bigger joke. He now looks like Santa. And while some of the art really makes it cool, they put him on this cart, which I don't care if you like it. It looks goofy as all hell.
It is incredibly... I understand why they did it. It is much easier to animate a cart than a carpet of Noblars. I get it, but nobody likes it more. Nobody.
It's ridiculous, and it makes him goofy as all hell as he sits there staggering around with his big, huge chop of meat. Well, his big limb, I suppose, of meat, sitting there, doing his thing. And you're just like, oh, no. I can't play Greasus in Total War. I find him unacceptably goofy. Every time I see him, I'm like, oh, I really love the character, but man, what have you done? Oh, that made me laugh, Morning Crescent. The Fat and the Furious.
Yeah.
Love that. It was really upsetting to me. But the lore that was added by Total War wasn't, and we're going to dive into that as well. So what I'm going to end on with my intro, and 22 minutes is not too long, is we have ourselves the Overtyrant of the ogres. The biggest, the fattest of all ogres. Now, the miniature might not necessarily really convey the scale that he has, and the silly cart on wheels wandering around.
Oh, yeah, he's way too small in Total War.
It really doesn't convey his scale. That has been
something I've genuinely been harassing the devs about since he got revealed.
Yeah, quite. But what we do know for certain, he is the biggest and the fattest of all ogres. And that means something deep to the ogres. And he has changed them almost completely. And that is something we're going to discuss as we make our way through all of the fun and exciting things from Greasus being a young little ogre to being end time splatted.
Yep. Okay, I'm going to fire through a couple of these really, really fast. Jonathan Kings, first of treats for the Von Karsteins on their campaign to reclaim...
Karstein is my cat. And Sophania is the sofa they sit on. That's my three cats. My three cats are Catsteins.
Sophania.
I missed this comment last night. Lindsay literally, because we were doing a Q&A last night, and this came up, and I read it as the Von Karsteins and Sylvania. And Lindsay came all the way out from the house, came all the way and stuck her head up and went, "No, it's the Von Katstein! Our cat, Isabella Von Katstein, Manfred Von Katstein, and Vladimir Von Katstein, also known as Shadow, and Sophania is the sofa." Obviously, and off she went, indignant. And I was like, oh, oops.
I fell into the same trap.
So, thanks.
Yeah, Lycor Gaming. You'll most likely talk about this, but was Grimgor versus Greasus a great fight, a meh fight, or anticlimactic and poor? Thank you, love ya. So, I mean, I can answer this really easily. If we don't actually get to see it, it's literally it's a single sentence.
Whoa, a waste!
Like Grimgor having a flashback, and that's it. So it was anticlimactic and poor. But we'll discuss it later. I think
we'll discuss this one, but the answer is anticlimactic and poor.
Yeah. Joe Numbers, during prep for our Soulbound game, we established Ish's language is Spanish, our Stone Mage is South American, and Olgu is Australia. Our Daughter of Cain is an Aussie. Perfect.
Cool. Yeah. Cool.
Biofoot, is it likely that ogres/ogres have near zero XS/XY dimorphism? Can't imagine ogre mothers chest feeding. Maybe we've seen ogre women all along. So I'll let Andy go.
I can answer this one. I know there's sexual dimorphism. Ogre females are slightly smaller and they have enormous chests. And we have seen multiple miniatures of them down through the years. Some of which were good, some of which were truly awful. I've also done some art for them back in the day. There is some... It's fair to say many of the ogres that some people thought were male were very likely female.
Yeah.
Because the traits that we focus on for femininity as humans are not the same traits that ogres are going to be displaying as feminine traits, but they do have, generally speaking, large boobs. But many of them don't, because it's quite
large boobs too.
Totally. But many of them don't, because a lot of the men have large boobs. Most of the men have large boobs. Man boobs, ogre boobs are just the thing. So a small-chested female ogre is going to look almost no different to your average male ogre as far as most humans are concerned. But if you go to an ogre, it could not be more clear. Because to them, the traits that differentiate the genders, the sexes, are exceedingly clear in the same way that that's normally the case as well with humans.
Red Guy, we'll do two more, then we gotta get going. Red Guy, I always thought that Chaos Ogres would follow Slaanesh more than the others because of their gluttony. Are there any groups of Slaanesh Ogres in lore? So that is a really common route to go if you're exploring ogres, would be the idea that you're dealing with like Slaanesh ogres or those that give in more hard. But what's kind of funny in a way is that when you really examine ogre culture and the way the Great Maw works, it can actually be more difficult, debatably, for Slaanesh to get its hooks into them because they're not overindulging. That's just their culture.
Yeah. One of the great mistakes that people make with chaos is assuming that if it involves what they see as that chaos god, then surely that chaos god dominates in that area. And they often miss the important part of chaos, and that chaos is just too much. It is corrupt and it is wrong. And to ogre culture, what they're doing with the maw and their hungers and their what you might see as excesses is the norm. So if they're to fall to Slaanesh, they have to go to genuine excess. It has to go rotten. And genuine excess for an ogre is a lot. And I do mean a lot. It's the sort of thing that would make other ogres go, whoa! And just take a moment to consider how much that would have to be to make an ogre go, dude, calm down. And that's what you need. So yeah, I completely agree with Ryan. Falling to Slaanesh for ogres, indeed, falling to any of the Chaos Gods for ogres is a harder ask than it is for many other species. And not just because they are resistant to chaos, but because they are actually resistant to chaos because of what they are.
Yeah, the vast majority of Chaos Ogres are not worshippers of the Dark Gods. They're just they're basically just mercenaries that have occasionally pick up mutations, which other ogres are like neat. But there's like notes even within the Chaos Ogre entries of the Warriors of Chaos books that like dedicated ones are very rare, and they're seen as pretty weird even by other Chaos Ogres because they get actually caught up in following a very, very different path. But they're incredibly rare. Because of that, there isn't really any like super famous groups of them. They tend to be individuals or like a small like group of like maybe 20 to 50. It's the idea of like a large number of them would be almost unheard of. Garrett, isn't there like a ritual for young ogres or even ogre children to have their guts cut open to heal/grow in size? Ignore this if I remember this wrong. So I remember, what happens if an ogre doesn't have this happen to him? So what you're probably thinking of is that there is a ritual for butchers, which is that if an ogre child demonstrate, they always get examined by a butcher, where the butcher will look at the child to make sure that it's going to be healthy, because ogres have a very survivalist mentality it's surprisingly practical, where they will have a child examined by the tribe's butcher, who will determine if the child is going to be healthy enough to live among them, or if it's going to be given to the tunnels, the caves down beneath. If it's not healthy enough, therefore it's not worth investing resources into, because the resources are precious. And some of them will go on to be gorgers, but the vast majority will die. And if the butcher senses that the child has the spark of magic, they will take them as their own. You can almost think of it as an apprentice. And the first part of that is they will take a bite out of the baby. As
it doesn't necessarily get bitten out. It's more they take a bite, but it doesn't say it actually eats that part, because they probably kill the baby. It goes and marks it and says, forever onward, you're marked as a future butcher.
Yeah, and for many of them, it is something that like cause a permanent scar and such. But it's literally their marking of they are going to follow the path of the mom, become a butcher.
And from that point onwards, this baby is force-fed. And they are force-fed, and they get bigger and bigger, and force-fed, because that's what it takes to become a butcher. And they will carry that big scar, which sometimes will be a big, horrible scar, because a bit was taken out of them. But the bite, the maw mark, if you will, is what sits on them forever.
Yeah, they don't like literally eat half the baby. It's very much more of a...
Yeah, totally.
All right, last one that we got to get up and run in. Darius Rose, how do female ogres rank on the muscle mommy scale? My top tiers are Bashiva, Omdra the Dread. Really? You put Omdra as a muscle mommy? All right, she's absolutely massive, but sure. The Morrigan from, I guess that's Return of Reckoning, the ROR. Unohana, Black Beauty, a fully preserved from Alberta I saw, Matriarch Deathclaw, and Big Rip, a protective / angry elephant I saw in Africa. That is a fascinating
That's quite the list, and thank you very much again for your generosity.
Yeah, thank you, Darius. I guess they'd be on that list for sure. I don't know where I would put them on that list.
Okay, so if you ever look at any of the ogre art, you tend to find that ogres don't look muscular. Ogres look big, and they look what most other species would refer to as fat. But that's because they have thick layers of very tough skin, and underneath they have bands and bands and bands of muscle. There's fat there as well, quite a lot of blubber, in fact. But it's all protective. They're not fat in the same way that, for example, a similar-looking human would be, which would be mostly fat. For an ogre, it's a very different situation, and the ogre females are no different to the men. So just take a look at the male art and go, hey, yeah, it's basically like that. They would be immensely muscular underneath it, but it's going to be a very loosely defined muscularity. It's not going to be bulging biceps or anything similar with pecs that can be seen from half a mile away. It's just going to be big rounded areas. So they're very muscular, but they're going to look through your average eye fat. I've got a picture somewhere of one, so while we're running through, I'm going to pull up one that I did a wee while back. Let's see if I can find it first, though.
Sure. All right. So from there, Greasus, Goldtooth.
Hey.
One of the things that's interesting when you're looking into the in-lore history of Greasus is one thing I actually agreed quite a bit with Andy, is that the original pitch for Greasus is that he does a lot of stuff in his quote-unquote youth, and then they basically just leave him with and now he's somewhat older, larger, and fatter and louder, but they don't give us really anything to chew on as far as like timetables or dates or anything, because 6th edition didn't that particular book just didn't come with a time scale section or a timeline. 8th edition though rolls right up and just throws out a timeline and goes, oh yeah, here's Greasus info. Now, we don't know when he's born, and we don't know how old he is when he takes over, which we'll get into in a second. But at some point, we could say with confidence in the 2400s,
late
2400s, Greasus is born. Now, it could be somewhere.
Born. Point taken.
Yeah, born. Yeah, sorry, born. Now, he could be as born as early as like 2530, but it's probably around like 2450-ish.
Indeed. So you understand what that means if you don't know the dates. That means by the end times, he's probably about 70. And you might go, hey, 70, he's pretty old. Not by ogre standards. By ogre standards, that means he's like in his 40s. Somewhere around about there. He's not the oldest ogre by any stretch. And the idea that he's this grey, older looking fat one is a miniature paint job version, which got ported over into Total War. Doesn't match the art that we had up to that point. Doesn't match the art even in 8th edition, as I recall. I should go take a look at that. As I recall,
he's like firmly middle-aged, but still in his prime.
Yeah, absolutely. If I recall the war in 8th, I'm going to go find it. But it's very dark haired. But the miniature goes a different line, as does Total War. But if we go with the timeline, he's probably in his 70s.
Yeah. So the big thing with Greasus is that he is born to the Goldtooth tribe. And the Goldtooth tribe already by this point is a tribe that has a good amount of wealth to it. They have developed a relationship with gold due to extorting that shiny baubles, but they don't understand necessarily as much the Goldtooth tribe has a history of valuing gold. It's something that is like passed down to Greasus from his own tribal history of that. Gold has an inherent value, and they as a tribe have like a whole series. The reason they're called the Goldtooths is because many of them will replace one or some of their teeth with a gold one. And either leading up to Greasus's lifetime or during his time when he takes over, there's a whole thing about that each tribe has what's called a maw tooth. And basically it's this big old, for most tribes, it's a big slab of rock that's like vaguely like a big pointy tooth, like that you would think the maw has. And these big maw tooths are carried around by the tribes when they migrate and they're moving around either within their valleys or at the world at large. And when they decide to stop and set up camp for a time, they throw down this big old maw tooth, and that basically indicates that is their territory. And they will build like a maw pit around it, but it's a really symbolic, important thing to each tribe. And the thing about the Goldtooth tribe is that they had such a love of gold. We don't know exactly when they adopt this particular practice, but their maw tooth is a giant honking chunk of gold. Like it is a huge golden slab that they carry around that marks not only their personal relationship to the maw, but just shows how important gold to them has been. And considering that they're called the Goldtooths, it's likely that they have carried an importance of gold for much longer than Greasus has been alive. It's much more of a trait that was passed down to him, but what he'll end up becoming very, very famous for is spreading his tribe's ideology out across the rest of ogre culture, which we'll get into a little later. So in any event, Greasus is born to the current, or at the time, the current tyrant of the tribe, Golf, G-O-F-G.
Well done.
And Golf is noted to be a pretty powerful tyrant. He is very large, he's very powerful, and he has many, 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 many healthy sons. Greasus is one among many. Ogres, especially the tyrants and the upper echelons of the tribes, have almost more of a they're implied to have much more of a relationship. If you think about like how certain animals work, like bulls and stuff, or you usually have like a main big bull that breeds with lots of females and will have lots of kids. Ogre culture, it tends to be that the bigger, the stronger, and the fatter you are, the more they don't have. We've never seen anything that suggests that there is like a wife-husband culture. It seems to be much more of a tribal community conglomerate. And it's like, and so with tyrants, they have tons of kids to the point where there's notes that many tyrants, they'll have like a bodyguard of iron guts. For a good number of them, all of those iron guts are their kids, their sons and daughters. Like there is a ton of kiddos for these guys. And Greasus is one among many, but he was very large, very strong, and very fat. And in ogre culture, it's very, very, very normal that the tyrant will be challenged on a pretty regular basis. And many times the challenge will come from the biggest, strongest ogres. So it will be from their own children, because their children will benefit the most from being their children. And it's kind of a fun aspect I actually really enjoy about ogre cultures, that for the ogres, they know, like they're very, very aware of the fact that their offspring are likely going to be the ones that kill and eat them.
Not that they necessarily know which ones are their offspring, though.
Yeah, very, very true. But it's just accepted as part of it's a norm. The idea that like you should be afraid of your kids doesn't really occur to them.
No.
Like they are going, nope, I want them to be as big and as strong and as fat as they could possibly be.
The whole tribe to be that.
Yeah. And which is fascinating, because a human would very much be like, I have to secure my position and make sure no one becomes more powerful than me. But the ogres are so culturally, or they're so community driven, which when you think of them as like how gluttonous and greedy they're often described to be, you wouldn't think, but they are an incredibly community driven culture. And Greasus, despite the idea that he is this gold mongerer, he is actually very, very community driven, which we'll showcase as he gets older. So in the year 2480, so roughly a little over 20 years before Karl Franz will ascend to the throne back in the Empire, Greasus challenges his father. And they have this big epic battle in the maw pit of the Goldtooth tribe. And Greasus successfully kills Goldtooth the Tyrant and eats his father, all of them. Because as we've talked about on prior streams involving ogres in their culture, to win a challenge, you can't just beat the other ogre. You've got to eat all of them.
And if you don't eat them all, you haven't really, in truth, taken on everything that ogre represented. Consumption is a core component of ogre culture. And if you don't eat everything that ogre was, then you don't take everything that ogre had. If he didn't eat all of his father, it almost certainly would have turned into immediate warfare between the other potential ogre challengers to be the tyrant of that particular tribe. But he ate all of him, meaning that he becomes what his father had, the tyrant. Now, if anyone wants to challenge him, they're challenging the tyrant, not some would-be pretender who couldn't even eat the last tyrant. It's very important for ogre culture, the consumption of what came before.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I said 2482. So almost exactly 20 years.
That's 20 years exactly before Karl Franz.
So for the next 5 years, Greasus spends that time basically building up his bulk and really getting control over the areas, the valleys surrounding the Goldtooth tribe. So this is
yeah, I've got something to add to this one, because I found the wording for this particularly interesting, because the wording stuck between the two editions. And this is the point where Greasus expands outwards. And the reason for doing so, I find slightly fascinating, because as it marks, I'm going to go find it because I wrote it down over here. He did it because he felt he had to prove himself. Now, most tyrants aren't sitting there trying to prove themselves. They've already done it by taking over their tribe. But he feels this need to prove himself. To whom? To his tribe, to his neighbors. There is a story building here about Greasus and possibly a king and Overtyrant to be who has somewhat of a self-image problem, who has something going on that makes him want to, which makes him want to appear bigger and more important than he feels he is himself. There is, right from the beginning of his character beats, that idea that he just feels like he needs to show off more than the other tyrants. And that shows a certain lack of self-confidence. There is a lack of strength of character here. And I think this will play into something that's going to happen relatively soon.
Yeah. One of the things that is interesting about Greasus is that, and I think this ties very hard into it, and we'll kind of, I think we're both feeling the urge to hit on this more in a little bit, of that Greasus is he's a bit unusual by ogre standards, of that he's much smarter than most ogres.
He is not.
I think he is.
He is not. He is absolutely not. And I think this is where the conspiracy that I was discussing comes in. This is where we get our first part, because Greasus is only intelligent for one reason. One. Because he's got a crown that makes him intelligent. It's marked in the magic item very clearly. It gives him great intelligence, almost that of a human. It gives him imagination. It gives him something that no other ogres have. And where does this magic item come from? So we've got ourselves the Overtyrant's crown. It's an enchanted basin-sized crown forged by the artisans of the Empire, who have been long interested in opening trade routes into the East. But they can't because of the ogres. So what do they give him? What do they give him? They give him an item that increases his intellect to near human levels. It gives him imagination. It gives him the idea that the gold his tribe is focused on has worth, and he can trade for it. He can do stuff with it. He can buy. He can talk. He can communicate. He can lead. I'm going to be relatively blunt and early with this one in the stream. The only reason Greasus Goldtooth becomes Overtyrant, manages to do what no other ogre does, is because the colleges of magic have given him an artifact which he had to pay for through the nose because he's got low self-esteem. He wants to prove everything that he's done. They paid through the nose for it, and it made him the Empire's pawn to get access through to the East. The old world now has a willing trading partner, and with his now significantly expanded intellect, he not only opened up the trade routes beside where he was, he then went on a campaign to bind all ogres to his way of thinking. Now, if the colleges of magic were designing this particular artifact, which they did, there's no doubt about it, they did. Yeah. There's absolutely no reason that they wouldn't also add also, can you pacify all the ogres, please, so that they can stop raiding all over the place? Our stuff, please, that would be great. Because it's clearly an artifact that has changed this tyrant into the Overtyrant, and has also opened up the world in a way that it just wasn't open before. The trade routes here, the only ones who could get through were the Cathayans, and they had enormous trains, really well guarded trains. Now anyone can get through if they pay. Anyone. The politics here changes entirely in the late 2400s, and it's because of the impact of the colleges of magic. So here's my big, I'm going to say something that might be seen as controversial to some, and that is that Greasus Goldtooth is an artifact, a creation of the colleges of magic, and probably the order of the Emperor of the Day.
Yeah, I actually hard agree with that. I think that makes complete perfect sense, because when we get into the saga of Greasus, which we're obviously about to, Greasus is a bit interesting. Yeah, he's very weird for an ogre. Like, he does some really clever shit, and it's always felt very strange, the suggestion, which up until Andy just said that, I had been under, which is the idea that he was this very, very clever ogre that then enhanced his intelligence after he becomes Overtyrant. But I think Andy's story makes so much more sense of if you have an ogre who feels like there is, who really has that hole in them and is looking for someone to fill it. And we have this iconic piece of art of like younger Greasus, literally before he has, it's almost the story being told in that artwork that we posted earlier.
That's exactly what I think too. It's just beautiful.
I'm going to post it again, of that we have this picture of younger Greasus he's not wearing the crown.
Yes, correct.
Like, he's young. He's not wearing the crown, and he's got Empire soldiers offering him tribute. And the idea, which I think perfectly suits his story, that the humans are able to see something in him, and like a plot is schemed where they gift him this massive, beautiful, enchanted crown, which is very powerful. Like the Overtyrant's crown cannot be understated for how significant it is, not only in its wealth and its beauty, but the power this fucking thing has. It not only makes him very, very smart. It does. It's for an ogre. But it protects him. Like the protection it grants him is nuts. He is a 4-up fucking ward save from that thing. Which, if you don't know from like tabletop stuff, a 4-up ward save is like the creme de la creme for special characters.
It's like Gotrek's Doom.
Yeah, that's the from a lore standpoint, that is the level of protection afforded to Thorgrim on the fucking throne of power. Like that, the Empire made this so that Greasus will not die unless something truly spectacular goes down, and he will be smart. And that is huge. And the idea that Greasus just sits around for 5 years after taking over and then suddenly goes, oh, I want to be Overtyrant.
Yeah.
It makes so much more sense of these 5 years are someone from the Empire, a trade caravan from the Empire encounters him, likely with a wizard on board for protection and wanting to go to Cathay and all this stuff. They go back to the Empire and say, hey, I've got an idea. And we get this whole story, which also would be a really cool story to tie into Karl Franz's father, who there's almost nothing written about.
Leopold.
Yep. And the idea that they would go, this is a genius idea to open up trade with Grand Cathay. This is a genius idea to get the ogres under control, which is making this incredible trade route so difficult, especially for the Empire, because the Empire has, with Marienburg being the situation it is, the Empire can't trade with Grand Cathay over the sea. It's a bitch.
Yeah, it's true. The Empire is there's something that we need to always remember about the Empire, which is easy to forget for all it's said 1,000 times. It is the most powerful old world realm by some significant measure, and it's the richest. Now, Marienburg is individually rich as a capital, and the Wasteland is sort of rich because of it, but the Empire as a whole is far richer, and Altdorf has significantly swelled its coffers. And one of the ways it does this is through trade. But the Altdorf trade routes are terrible, particularly because they all have to go through, if we go with our standard trade routes down through the Reich, through Marienburg, and get taxed through hell. Opening up other trade routes are absolutely essential. And the trade routes through to the east are dominated by the Cathayans. This would suggest that there is an emperor, probably Leopold, Karl Franz's father, who went, I want this trade route open. Come up with plans. It's possible something they've been trying to do for 100 years and failed in a variety of ways. And this is the one that succeeded. And we know it's the Empire that's involved because it's written in black and white. That the Empire provide him with a crown that takes him from a standard ogre. Now, it doesn't matter if he's intelligent, not intelligent, whatever. Literally, he's a tyrant. He is a big bastard ogre tyrant. And it takes him from that to something that they can use. Something that they can work with, and grants him intelligence and protects him, making it very likely that he will survive challenges against him. And it's not just that, though. It's also a symbol of authority, meaning that any who defeat him are likely to take it on. It's not just a weapon. There's 40,000 weapons scattered around, and many of them broken, the Ogre Kingdoms. But this is a symbol of his authority. And by making it a symbol of his authority, you almost can see the very clear political motivation behind giving that to him, because it opens that trade route. I would argue Cathayans are both delighted and absolutely appalled at what this change brings, because they will move from basically pushing their way through with their caravan trains, fighting their way through because they're nigh on impregnable in terms of the greater damage that they're going to be taking from a single ogre tribe, to having to pay their way through as an Overtyrant is suddenly built up. All of the ogres are now working together. Many of them are swarming down towards the roads to protect it and stop Cathayans. In many respects, respects, the Empire has played a blinder of a card against Cathay and taken away many of Cathay's sole trade route control by empowering the ogres and making a third party effectively control this very tight trade route. Now, I won't make sort of dodgy and rather unfortunate Straits of Hormuz comments, but loosely, this is taking control of the Straits of Hormuz in our current environment, if you want to go look at current world politics. And what they've done is they've said, well, instead we're going to empower the locals to control it rather than requiring 1,000 battleships to push through it, which we cannot do from all the way over in the Empire. But we can pay through this particular area. Changes everything in terms of the trade routes.
Yeah. So, not to get ahead of ourselves, dialing back the clock a little bit. We have this 5-year gap from 2482 to 2487, where this plot, which I think makes perfect sense and is very difficult genuinely to argue against.
It kind of is.
Yeah, this plot goes down. And Greasus, and to be clear, the Overtyrant's crown is literally nailed into Greasus's head. Like, he doesn't take that thing off ever. It literally states it's nailed into his skull.
Yep.
Which, you know, dead hard, but ogres, what are you going to do? And Greasus goes, I want to be Overtyrant. I'm going to be Overtyrant. And he starts scheming of how he's going to do this. And so the first thing, there's a whole saga about it, which the first great story is that Greasus knows that, especially at this time in his life, he's relatively young. And he can't just barge in to the other notable tribes and just beat them in a fight. That's not going to go down well, because while he is very, very strong and big, the tyrants of these other tribes are also exceptionally strong and big. And so the first thing he does is the tribes immediately surrounding the Goldtooth tribe get together for a great feast, which great feasts are a notable aspect of ogre culture. They have been since the very, very first Overtyrant, hundreds, actually thousands of years ago, like 2,000 years ago, plus, because it was like minus something that we had the very, very first minus. It's hold on,
it's in the army list. I can't remember the date off the top of my head either.
Yeah, minus 950.
950. There you go.
Bug so the fist.
3,000 years before.
Yeah, so 3,000 years ago was the very first Overtyrant. And he established the concept of Great Feast, which is basically just the Overtyrant has the authority to call all the ogre tribes together and have a big feast. But Greasus finds that there is a midwinter feast happening in one of the valleys adjacent to his own tribe. And so normally, if a tyrant wanted to try and take over another tribe, the standard fare would be to go over there during the midwinter feast, challenge the tyrant, beat him in a fight, eat him, and then beat all the successive challengers. Greasus doesn't do this. Instead, he scales up the mountains overlooking the valley where this midwinter feast is happening, where there are several tribes. And once he's above them, he starts picking up giant boulders and throwing them down from the mountaintop to crush various ogres, and just starts yelling and bawling and just swearing and just being
gotta love ogres.
A loud, yeah. And as he's crushing lots of ogres who are like running around trying to get out of the way as confusion, because in many ways he's kind of doing something very sacrilegious from an ogre standpoint, of that he's interrupting a feast. He's interrupting like a great observance to the Great Maw, and he causes so much destruction with all of his boulder throwing and yelling that an avalanche and a rock slide go off, and the entire valley is buried. So everybody dies. So this isn't like I'm going to kill the tyrant and take over. He murders several tribes in their totality.
Yeah, and this is, without putting too much of a stress on it, not how ogres normally conduct affairs.
Yeah.
They're pretty simple, basic creatures. They would normally, if they had an issue with the nearby tribe, guts out, charge it, attack it, possibly in the night with a clever ambush or something similar, then eat them. the eating and the consumption part is an important cultural note. That says, I have taken on everything your tribe was. It's now mine. He doesn't, which means by this point, I would argue, he has already got his crown.
Yes.
And he's definitely in a position where he is out thinking and taking out potential threats. And he takes a very atypical route here. He just avalanches them all, kills them all, and then shows, hey, look, I can win. And ogres respect winning, even when he didn't do the consumption part. They're like, oh yeah, well done. Well done, they're all dead, way! Because they're pretty simple creatures. They're, of course, obsessed by the consumption part, but they also like a braggart. Someone who can shout louder, throw louder, do louder, be louder, wander around that wrestling ring with his mic in his hand, shouting out about how awesome he is. And he can say legitimately he wiped out entire tribes by himself. That brings a lot of social clout, even though he didn't do the more cultural way of resolving it, which would have been nom nom nom, eat them all up.
Yeah, and it's worth noting, I forgot to mention this part, that before he starts this, he had declared himself Overtyrant. So he had already sent out like missives and like bellowers or ogres to all of the neighboring tribes to say, Greasus says he's Overtyrant now, and everybody said, he fucking what?
Who is this guy?
And there is a whole thing that many of the tribes, their tyrant said, I'm gonna kill that guy. Mm-hmm. He's talking a lot of shit. I'm gonna kill him. And for Greasus, this is a moment to kill a lot of tribes at once, a lot of rivals, and for him to be able to say, if you threaten me, if you don't do what I say, you're going to end up like them. I'm going to bury you. And ogres go, whoa, okay, that's kind of scary.
And I think that we should just take a moment to note that what he is doing is not what ogres do. And I know I've said that already, but we do need to make sure that we strongly reinforce this. This is not how ogres conduct war. He has taken a very different route. And we know why, because it's hard-coded into his rules and in his description. It's because he's smarter. He's got more imagination. He can think outside the box. And the very simple box that ogres generally use for combat is hit, hit, eat, eat, hit, hit, eat. And he's like, yeah, no, win. Take out the most important and powerful ones. Show you can do that. Others will just capitulate if the stories spread. If they bellow from the mountaintops that the Overtyrant is spreading his will, many will just go, yeah, sure, whatever, because they don't want to fight something that's big. And he gets bigger because he's going to be constantly chowing down using what he can to increase his already significant girth.
Yeah. And this ties into how he gets the Tribe Stealer title, or big name, big name as they're called. So almost immediately after this, so very, very quickly after this, Greasus does one of the most infamous acts that he commits from an ogre standpoint, from an ogre cultural standpoint, which is that after he kills a significant amount of the people that wanted him dead and were talking shit about him in rival valleys, which now the Goldtooth tribe is spreading into and taking all this fresh territory, there's another tyrant, a big one, by the lovely name of
it's got bad mouth, isn't it? Yeah, it's got
bad mouth, which is the okay, sure.
I mean, hey, big names and gut, sure.
Yeah. So Gut Badmouth is a massive tyrant. He's bigger than Greasus at this point. And granted, Greasus is not nearly as large as he will become by the time we all know and love him in the era of Karl Franz. But Gut is just monstrous in size. And Greasus has already shown that he can deal with entire tribes, but now is when he basically is going to demonstrate that he can take on any challenger. And so during the Hoof and Horn Feast, which is given no explanation, but is a very fun name.
It's a thing that happens.
Yeah. Where Gut Badmouth is presiding as the big tyrant who's overseeing this, Greasus does, at least at first, the typical thing, where he marches in marches up to where Gut Badmouth is lounging on his seat as tyrant, and he says, "I challenge you, fight me." And Gut goes, "All right." And he takes off his gut plate and starts cracking his knuckles, and he starts climbing down into the maw pit, which the maw pits are these big giant pits the ogres will dig in the ground, and they'll stick a bunch of like sharpened stakes in the sides to make it look like a big mouth.
The big fighting arena.
Yeah. And that's where they handle all challenge disputes. If you're going to be fighting and you're like really fighting, it's not just like a casual game of face break, which is an actual game ogres play. You're supposed to go down into the pit and fight. And so Gut climbs down into the pit and gets ready. He's unlimbering. He's getting all set to go, waiting for Greasus to climb down and fight him as is tradition. And Greasus, who has not started to climb down the pit, then looks at him, smiles, and then he runs forward and jumps. And Greasus literally belly flops at Gut, who is like, "What?" Because this is unheard of. This is never been done before. And Greasus lands on him, and all that weight coming down his head all at once snaps Gut's neck and kills him instantly.
Indeed, from the top rope. And yes, Hannah, you're absolutely spot on. What you've got to see here is that there are rules for how things are done in ogre society. And wrestling makes a perfect analogy, where a wrestling match starts with the ding, 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 and then they get into it. Before that, there's a whole lot of shouting. And ogres love shouting. Anything that's big and brash goes down really well with ogres. And the whole point of a challenge is so that they can get a lot of shouting at each other first, and everyone that's watching can get super excited. It's a spectator sport. That's what they're there to watch. So he's down there and he's starting off, arms up, riling up the crowds, all the ogres bellowing like mad, expecting the next tyrant, the so-called Overtyrant, to come in and do exactly the same thing. Because that's how you do it. And then they square off against each other in this circle and go to town. Hopefully, defeating the other and then eating him. But as marked there by Jonathan King, one of our members here on YouTube, thank you very much, Jonathan, it's Greasus with the steel chair. That's exactly what occurs. Before the bell rings, before anything happens, before the boasting, which is so culturally ingrained into ogres, that the idea of not boasting first is alien. It would be like not taking a breath before going underwater. You just don't do that. You take a deep breath before you go underwater, because if you don't, you'll drown. It's entirely written into them to be big, to boast, to shout, to show how amazing they are. He doesn't. He charges and attacks immediately, breaking all of the largely unspoken rules, because they're ogres. They don't write anything down on handy pillars, a stone full of laws, no special rules for how their wrestling matches should take place. They just do it instinctually, the same way that a spider makes a web instinctually. It doesn't need to be clever. It doesn't need to have rules. It just builds it. And that's how they fight. They boast first. They shout. They get all the ogres excited. In many respects, it's almost praising them all. He doesn't. Fuck that. Because he's there to win. And he does. And he wins by doing the equivalent of seriously fucking cheating with a steel chair to the head, breaking all the rules. The steel chair in this particular metaphor being his belly, which, as we've discussed already, easy to go, well, wouldn't that just be a giant bit of blubber hitting him? Ha ha ha, that'll never crack a skull. No, these things are fucking solid. They are not made of blubber. Bands of muscle. And when contracted, it's like being hit by a steel train. Straight to the head, cracks his skull, breaking tradition entirely, leaving all of those ogres on all sides going, what's just happened?
Yeah, there's a funny note of that when he does it. It isn't like all the ogres go, whoa! A lot of them go, whoa! Like yeah. It's just like silence of the surrounding ogres being like, is he allowed to do that? And there's a very funny note of that. The ogres at the time actually started debating about whether that was allowed. They were like, can he do that?
And they're like, oh! I mean, did he shout? No. Did he scream? No. He just charged him and killed him. Wait, Gut's dead. Yeah, he just killed him. Did he eat him? Oh, yeah. He ate him. He ate him completely in front of everyone as they were all just looking around going, what's happened? This is weird. How did this happen? And again, the process here is quite clear. We've got everything written in black and white without them necessarily saying it. And that's that he has been empowered beyond what most ogres normally can achieve. And the thing he's been empowered with is the intelligence to see how stupid their rules are, how stupid their whole setup is, and the fact that none of the ogres actually care about the rules, because they don't. No, they just do them. They just do them by rote. It's what they are. It's how they think. It's how they react. And when he goes and breaks the rules, they pretty much all go, can you do that? I mean, he does. So, hey, he's done it. It must be fine. Yeah.
So there are ogres among the crowd that argue technically he did do it right. Like they followed the pit.
He ate him. He ate him. Well, I suppose he's done it. And for those who'd already met Gut, they were like, well, holy shit, I don't want to fight him. At all.
And what I think stands well that Greasus was ready for as well is there were several ogres who went, he cheated, that doesn't count. And Greasus goes, you're talking about me? Come at me. And 3 bruisers, and bruisers are literally next in line to be tyrant. These very likely were Gut's own sons and daughters. 3 of them clamber down and fight him, and he fights them fair, but he's stronger and bigger than them, and he just ate. And so not only does he devour the entirety of Gut, who's bigger than him, he then kills and eats 3 more bruisers.
Oh, I love it.
He eats like 4.5 times his own body weight.
Yeah, that's one hell of a meal. Pick that one with your big bone toothpick.
Yeah, and largely between those 2 incidents, which this gives him the tribe stealer big name, because in the views of some, he literally stole that tribe because he cheated, kind of. And this word spreads, and this is enough of an incident that everyone goes, you know what? I don't know if I'm necessarily going to listen to him, but I'm not going to talk shit about him because that guy's kind of scary.
Yeah, he's as much an Overtyrant as, there's so many historical analogies, most of which are slightly controversial. So I'll just simply say that he doesn't have much control over the other ogre kingdoms, assuming you even want to refer to them as kingdoms. He nominally leads them, and any that are close to him, he leads much more closely. Those that are distant, particularly when you move high up into the mountains of Morn, some of them have barely even heard of him. And they go about their own business, doing their own thing without any concern at all for some supposed Overtyrant. But should he go en masse up north, most of them are just going to follow in because he's coming with thousands upon thousands upon thousands of ogres. That's impressive shit. And when you see him, by this point, he's big now. He was already a big ogre. He was not a small guy. He was a big guy, and now he has eaten several very big, important ogres. And as ogres eat big things, they in turn get bigger. A little bit like when you hit orcs, they get bigger, and they get bigger and bigger. And it's not just their bellies go out or they become more muscular. They also get height. It's one of the ways that they grow. And if you can eat something enormous, like a big, massive mammoth or some equivalent, then you yourself will get bigger. One of the reasons many of their hunters are some of the bigger examples of the ogres, because they go out and they try to find the biggest thing they can to eat it. That's their sole motivation, eating the big thing to prove their capabilities. And by this point, he has eaten a lot, and probably the unspoken story being challenged a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yep, but which we'll get into.
He's clever.
Yep. Okay, we're gonna slam through a few more super chats really fast. Joe Numbers, how strong is the average ogre, young / healthy? They're very strong. It's stated that a healthy ogre bull can very reliably take on 12 men in a fight.
Yeah, it's something that's really poorly represented in the battle game and the role-playing game. The role-playing game, because it's got a silly size stat, sort of does it because any ogre will pretty much kill any human in the role-playing game. Body them.
They're horrifying.
Yeah, they're horrifying.
Size rules
but inside the battle game, they're just strength 4. They're not that amazing. It's up to strength 5. I mean, Goldtooth is strength 5, as I recall. But in terms of what they are nigh on, depending on which version you go with, 9 to 12 foot tall on average, somewhere around that area. They're about twice the height as a man in most, but they're so much bigger. They carry so much more weight. They are almost unkillable when it comes to a group of humans. They're basically just trying to hold them off with long weapons before they all get swiped and killed. They are exceedingly strong. Humans get picked up and tossed by them with ease. In the same way that if you were trying to compare your strength with a 4-year-old child, I imagine you would go, yeah, I'm a good bit stronger than that 4-year-old child. That 4-year-old child can do nothing to you. Even 10 4-year-old children charging you is not going to cause you a great deal of worry. If you're actually going to, your biggest problem is going to be, how do I not?
That you don't do this, but yes.
Yeah, how do I not hurt them? How do I not hurt these children? Because I'm being surrounded by them now. Oh my goodness. They are so much bigger, and humans are basically children to them. However, there are many who can easily defeat them one way or another, and they're often things like elves, because elves are so fast, they can never get their hands on them, this little slimy little bastards. They're bouncing about all over the place and cutting in important places, meaning that an elf versus an ogre is a surprisingly fair fight. Dwarves are remarkably tough and very used to holding up their shields and taking on blow after blow after blow. But dwarves, again, utterly outclassed normally by an ogre. Ogres are big, strong, and terrifyingly capable creatures. One of the reasons that Cathay really tried to genocide them.
Yeah.
And then they tried hard to get rid of them and failed. Ogres are terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Send it over, Lord Sotek. I need you to know I didn't call you Timon the other day. I don't know how that word slipped in there. It made me laugh though. Also, have ogres fought never?
When I was a young warthog.
Yeah. They've probably fought Never Chosen, but so few of the Ever Chosens are detailed. So who knows? Tribal, hi guys. Lisbon question: do you think Lisbon finds spirituality in the way they serve the old ones, or is it more pragmatic / cold-blooded than that? I would both. I would recommend go watch our Tehinuan stream. Go watch our Krokgar stream, and also go read Starshare's Ruin by AJ and Tchaikovsky, who kills it. That book is amazing, and he does a really good job of answering this.
And even Tchaikovsky is a great guy too.
Darius Rose, sorry, I mean Brock would be the equivalent of Greasus, as ogres are heavily muscled and Brock's one of the biggest, meanest guys. Not that he's fat. Also, Black Beauty is a fully preserved T-Rex I saw at a museum. She's beautiful.
Oh, lovely. I know the T-Rex. I know the one.
Serpenza, why are they called kingdoms if they aren't? GW, okay, to be fair.
Because ogres like big things.
Yeah, also, GW throws around the word kingdoms like it's going out of style because they call it the Kingdom of Bretonia, even though it's made up of dukedoms and duchies.
It is a kingdom because it's got a king. It is absolutely a kingdom, and correctly referencing as king. King is not the highest rank of nobility. It's just one of many. In some places, prince is as the same as king. The princes in the UK are only called princes because of like the Prince of Wales and the like, which used to be an equal title to the king. The king and prince used to be equal titles. Let's say the Prince of Monaco or whatever, equal title, they're sovereign titles. It's basically a way of saying to most UK-speaking English speakers, because it's mostly UK people they're talking to, the biggest form of royalty. And in the UK, we're a kingdom. So they go, that's the biggest one, and ogre's like the biggest thing. So they just use that name almost as a way of hard coding the idea that ogres think they're bigger and better than anyone else, or at least the same. So the top tier word to use is kingdom. Now, is that the word they use for themselves? No, not at all. It's just a transliteration of whatever grumbarth piece of nonsense that the individual ogres will be saying.
I saw someone mention this earlier, of like, but they speak English in Total War. They speak English in everything that GW's written, because GW's never detailed grumbarth, but they speak their own tongue. Like they have their own completely unique language.
Yes, they do. Grumbarth.
Yeah. Cornchima, Greasus versus Gelt for Zalming's hand, who would win? Barring a miracle, I think Greasus would absolutely obliterate Gelt.
Yeah. I mean, although having said that, Gel just flies by, zap, 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 zap. I mean, it's never going to be a fist combat.
I would not put it past Greasus to just be able to throw something at him and hit him.
Yeah, they're both giant cheats, so it would be an interesting battle.
Yes, yeah, it would be a duel of the cheaters. Tyrant, Winds of Magic mentioned a 4-way war between ogres, greenskins, chaos dwarfs, and Skaven over a warpstone meteor. How would you write that? Incredibly chaotic. Yeah, that would be super fun. There would be a lot of backstabbing, a lot of betraying, and probably some unexpected clever moves you wouldn't expect from various groups. But yeah, that is a very, very fun story. Mads Christensen. There we go.
Mads Christensen.
How many magic runes are on Galmaraz? Ha 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 ha. The official replica has the Rune of Fury and Skulf Blackhammer plus 2 Vig runes. By the way, why has the Sigmar gotten a model in AOS? I'll answer the second one. I'll let Andy go first.
So this is not confirmed anywhere, and official replicas are as official in terms of the runes they offer as you making it up yourself, in that licensed stuff often just goes places that possibly would never have been accepted by the studio. You've got to remember that licensed material is not okayed by the studio, it's okayed by the licensing department, who make judgment calls themselves. So don't take what might be sitting on an official replica as something that's definitely the case. Now, if we look at the rules for the hammer through its various iterations, we can very quickly say it's got at least 2 runes, and those 2 runes are impossible. One would be Skalf Blackhammer, correct, spot on. And the other one would be Alaric the Mad, which makes no sense at all, because Alaric probably wasn't alive when that hammer was made. Because Alaric's the Mad rune is the core special rule of what Sigmar's hammer does, and Skalf Blackhammer is also one of the core rules. Anything else, a Rune of Fury, for example, 2 other runes would make sense within the normal runic setup. The answer to this is we don't know. We could say 2 master runes, which would make it super special on top of something else, but it's always going to be a judgment. But if we just use its special rules, Skalf Blackhammer, Alaric the Mad. One last thing, I'm about to produce the Lawhammer version of it's not really Sigmar's hammer, but Sigmar's hammer. And when I say it's going to make that idea of 4 runes look like a baby weapon, no other way of putting it. It's already hit our game, and they have been both shocked and appalled at how terrifyingly powerful that hammer is, and everyone's been having absolute joy with it. So I'm about to do the write-up and post-up. I'm hoping to do it before I go on holiday, because I'm going on holiday next Tuesday. I'm going off around Scandinavia. I say I'm going on holiday. It's a busman's holiday. I've been invited up to a con in Sweden where I'm going to be doing some talks this weekend. No, next weekend. I'm going to do some talks and stuff. And if you're in Sweden, come over to GothCon and come and say hello to me. Hello, everyone. I'll be in GothCon. And then I'm just doing a tour around the rest of Scandinavia and hopefully still dialing in for Lorebeards wherever I happen to be one particular week. So assuming I can get that to work, there will be no hiccup with Lorebeards except for next Tuesday, where I'm not going to be available because I'm going to be on a plane.
There you go. And why hasn't Sigmar gotten a model AOS? Because he's considered too much of a big boy.
It makes no sense.
Yeah, he's the absolute big boy. But it's funny because he's ended up being like one of the only gods without a mini, which makes it kind of sad. But they
not the only. There's quite a few that they've sort of skipped on. Yes,
but there are more with than without.
Yeah, that seems fair.
But the biggest thing is that the way they explain is that he is more of a strategist figure that has to direct where the Stormcast are going, because he's literally throwing thunderbolts from Azir. So he's busy is the TLDR. Tyrant, do ogres keep growing throughout their lives? Yes, they mentioned there's a bigger tyrant in his lore. Hard to imagine an ogre bigger than present Greasus. So as long as they can keep eating and they have enough to eat, they will keep getting bigger.
Yeah, ogres follow a somewhat fantasy physiology. They don't follow standard biology. And their fantasy physiology is somewhat like this. An ogre in its natural state will be around about 9-10 foot tall. And they need to eat a lot to maintain that. If they don't, they get thin and weird. And we've got some examples of thin, weird, brainless, Yeti-like ogre type things out there. If they eat something that's bigger than they require, they increase in size. And it starts off with their belly, which begins to swell. Their whole body begins to take on more weight. And then they begin to take on height. They need to eat a lot to take on height. They need to take an awful lot to become a proper big ogre. And if they stop eating and the consumption that is required for that, they get smaller again. So it's a weird fantasy physiology. Where they sort of grow and decrease in size. It's not just age brings weight and height. No, it's not. They could say if they were sitting in a relatively poor area where there's not a lot of hunting, all of the ogres, be they young or old, could be relatively small by ogre terms. But if they're in a place where there's prime hunting and they're all eating like mad, you're going to find that the ogres are bigger and fatter and much more capable.
Yep. Darius Rose, I always imagined Greasus could run incredibly fast, like Fat Albert racing a car when he wants to, especially based on the Warhammer 3 cutscene with the advisor. Yeah, Greasus is very much, a lot of people, this is just a misunderstanding when people look at him, think that he can't walk because he's too fat. No, God, no.
No.
He just chooses not to.
I'm going to be super blunt about this. The bigger you are as an ogre, the more capable and strong you are as an ogre, not the less capable and more handicapped. It's not like humanity and obesity. They're not obese by any stretch. They are, in fact, peak physical specimens. If you want to know what he's like, he is the equivalent of the top tier athlete. That is what he is. He is ogre top tier. He is fully capable of doing whatever the hell he wants at full speed. The reason that he doesn't is purely his psychology, and he wants to give off the idea that he is better than everyone. He gets carried around everywhere. It's not that he needs to move slowly, it's that he chooses to move slowly. And if he wants to get up and go, he absolutely can. And I think that's something that has sort of been lost in a lot of the interpretations of him.
Yeah, but like the Total War cutscene where when the advisor like says something that catches Greasus' attention, he seems to practically teleport from where he was sitting to where the advisor is many, like a good 30 yards away. That is very accurate. He would be able to move. Perfect.
And it's so cool as well because other species will utterly misjudge him. You know, you go against elves and dwarves and humans, and their first thought upon seeing that fat, slow, carried around thing is he's gonna be easy to take down. And then his speed that he can move with, the extraordinary strength he has because of the enormous mace that he's carrying, and combined with the intelligence, in many respects, lying down and taking at his ease is because he's clever, because he's constantly trying to put everyone else on the back foot. So you're always imagining Darius, I think, is spot on.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shame. It's like one of the biggest shames of why when they went with the cart for Greasus. One of the things that the Noblar carpet really leans into well is the idea of Total War that it would have been cool to see him have an animation where he springs up, which he does in his storyline, which we'll talk about. He relies on people thinking he can't move as quick as he can, and then when he does, he catches them and they die instantly.
Yeah. He's a cunning ogre.
Is Greasus' name built on Marcus Crassus? It's probably built on the fact that it sounds like greasy. It's just greasy.
I'd love to say it's bigger and better than that, but I really don't think so.
Yeah, Darius Rose, Paul Heyman, my client requires you to say that Ice Drake Yagrul was an Emperor class dragon in the mine he destroyed. Okay. So getting back, this is a perfect point to get back.
Yeah, let's move on.
Yeah, so Greasus has become the declared Overtyrant. Now, contrary to what you might think from reading the book, this actually leads into him cementing his role, which is the Battle of the Firemouth, relatively early in his career. That the Battle of the Firemouth specifies it happens almost right after he declares himself Overtyrant, just like maybe a couple of years later. And the Battle of the Firemouth basically is a story where Greasus is trying to spread his influence across the entirety of the Mountains of Morn. Calling them the Ogre Kingdoms isn't particularly helpful, but the Mountains of Morn. He wants all of the ogres to see him as the big boss in charge, rather from a a very deep standpoint, but he knows he needs to achieve something massive. He can't just win in challenges. He has to do something big. And very conveniently, falling into his lap is a problem for the ogres, which is that way up in the north of the Mountains of Morn, close to very on the edge where the Darklands meet the Mountains of Morn, way up on Mount, I think Blackfang, there's this big mountain where there's a ton of black orcs. Because way back in the day, a little over 2,000 years ago, you had the big Black Orc Rebellion, where the Black Orcs rebelled against the Chaos Dwarfs. The Chaos Dwarfs eventually beat them and chased them out, and they scattered to the winds. A lot of them went to the nearby Mountains of Morn, where they set up shop. And we have this orc that, if I recall correctly, what's his last name? Or is it Grim something?
Can't remember. Happy call it.
Hold on, I got it. So we've got Iron Skull. There it is.
Iron Skull. There you go.
Yeah. So Iron Skull is noted to be a Black Orc war boss who has taken over at Mount Blackfang, and he is a scary fucking orc.
Yeah.
He is massive. He's been there a long time, and he controls a significant amount of territory. And he is actually a very, very smart Black Orc, as the story will go on to show. And Urk wants to take over the Mountains of Morn as his own little personal empire, and he gets a war going. And it's not like, oh, it might be a war. No, it's a full-fledged war Iron Skull aimed at the Ogre Kingdoms.
Yep.
And Urk basically goes around crumping the other greenskins. He gets all the Night Goblin tribes from underneath the mountains. He gets all the wolf tribes that are scattered around the eastern steppes and the Darklands, and he builds up this big old legion made up almost a significant amount of by Black Orcs, because Black Orcs are one of the dominant greenskin species in the Mountains of Morn. It's a very harsh environment. And he starts making his way south, murdering the hell out of all the ogre tribes he can come across. And if you actually look at the map of where Mount Blackfang is to where he's eventually going, which is the Firemouth, it is a ridiculous distance. This is like hundreds of miles that this wall plows through, which makes sense. It's a wall. So he's fighting his way down towards the Firemouth. Now, the Firemouth, to very, very TLDR in the interest of time, is a god to the ogres. It is the largest volcano in the Mountains of Morn. It's absolutely massive. Total War actually finally gave us art of it, and it's gorgeous. I can see why they would think it's a god, and they genuinely believe that it is the offspring between the sun and the Great Maw.
Great Maw.
And it's this like huge thing that's got this big caldera at the top, and it's like constantly, even when it's dormant, it's always got lava flowing. But when this thing erupts, it is titanic, to the point that because they see it as a god due to its size and the fact that it could easily annihilate them if it quote unquote wanted to, when the Firemouth has big eruptions, the ogres interpret that as their god literally calling them to war. So it's very, very big and important to their culture. And Iron Skull, the Black Orc, knows this. So he decides that he wants to try and beat the ogres in a big fight and truly break them, humiliate them. So he sends out scouts all across, and he decides that he's going to draw them all in to the Firemouth, because if he gets there first, he can set up his army up on the higher slopes, and they will have this high ground advantage that will be very, very difficult for the ogres to overcome. So his Wa rushes to the Firemouth. They chase out the Firebellies, who are the religious cult that worship the Firemouth and live there. They're a very unique subculture of ogres. Kicks them out, and he takes it over very, very successfully. And word starts to spread about the Ogre Kingdoms about this insult, because it's what it is. It's a gauntlet being thrown in a way they understand very well. And Greasus hears about it and goes, perfect. This is exactly what I need. I can rescue the Firemouth. I can save our god from this insult, and I can also crush the Black Orcs in the way he views it, my domain, and I will become a legend, and this will make me the Overtyrant. So he sends out word all across the Ogre Kingdoms, which word's already been spreading. So a lot of ogres are already heading to the Firemouth anyway, because ogres, like, there are so many things like the Challenge Stone, the Sentinels, there's a lot of different places all over the Mountains of Born where if ogres hear that someone else has set up shop there, some of them will immediately start heading towards that place to fight whoever it is that's like claiming their territory. So all the tribes start gathering up, and Greasus sends out word and says, hey, I'm gathering up. I got lots of food. I got lots of goodies. Let's meet up. And all the tribes go, all right, fine. Because by this point, he's established himself enough as a terror that they're going to be willing to meet with him. So they all...
And by this point, he's already got some of his big names, like Drake, or was it Drake Crush? Because he killed the Ice Drake, Yogrel. And he's got the other one as well. What's the other one? Gatecrasher, that was it. Because he literally broken down dwarf gates, massive stone gates, bam, by himself, taking the whole thing out, allowing them to plunge into a dwarf hold. So he's already established somewhat of a myth as to who he is, and now he's arriving and trying to gather up all of the various ogre tribes in the surrounding area to take on Urk. And he's Urk, is his name Urk? Yeah, Urk. Yes, yeah, Urk. To take on Urk because he is wanting to effectively solidify his rule. He wants to have all of the other ogre tribes go, holy shit, he saved this. He did it. And the Black Orcs are a perfect choice to do this. Having said that, though, as we've discussed multiple times in the past, Black Orcs are not a pushover. They are terrifying.
Yeah, to add some further context of like how ogres are seeing like these various lists, Yogrel, the Ice Drake, was huge. You may have seen this banner if you're playing Total War or whatever, but there's a magic item associated with him, which is the Dragonhide banner, which Yogrel was so goddamn big that after Greasus killed him, they skinned him, so they took all his scales, his hide. It took 24 of the largest ogres to pick it up and carry it. Think about that. 24 of the largest ogres were required to pick up the hide of this absolute fucking monster that Greasus beat down.
Yep. And there's by this point he's also said to have taken out and eaten an entire herd of, what's the name of the things? The gruntalopes. The gruntalopes, that's them. The gruntalopes, an entire herd by himself. Now, whether this is true or not is actually secondary to the fact that everyone thinks it's true.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of the story that he's telling. He's basically a wrestler going around from town to town to town, saying how fucking brilliant he is, taking out locals, showing that he should be the Overtyrant, and then hopefully arriving to take on Urk. But as has already been made quite clear by Ryan, Urk has a plan. And he is not an orc, nor is he a goblin. He is a military genius in his own right and has struck hard into the heart of the Ogre Kingdoms to effectively do exactly what the Overtyrant is trying to do, make a name for himself. A whole WoW is beginning to build around him. He's got wolf riders from across the Wolflands joining in with his particular WoW to be. He's got a whole bunch of different tribes coming up behind him, and he also has the high ground. But beyond just having the high ground and Star Wars aside, he also has been killing ogres for possibly decades now. He knows how to kill an ogre. But as we've already noted, so does our Overtyrant. Our Overtyrant doesn't play by the rules.
Yeah, so Urk's plan as this giant, the amount of ogres that join up with Greasus on the way to the Firemouth is spectacular. Like, they're literally shaking the earth, the tread of this army. And Urk's plan is simple but devious and very, very, it's genius, which is basically he puts all the goblins out in front, just legions of goblins all along the slopes so that the ogres will charge up, start fighting goblins, and they'll be stuck trying to force their way uphill against endless hordes of night goblins and regular goblins and all the little critters they've got, with wolf goblins constantly harassing them along the flanks, and that they'll start to get tired. And once they're tired, he will lead an entire legion of black orcs who have been killing ogres forever downhill with all the momentum they'll build up and slam into them, murdering the lot of them and breaking them on the literal shores of their god, basically routing them and taking over. And if it worked, it would be a death blow.
Yeah,
to the ogres control over the mountains.
It's a lovely plan. He is effectively trying to recreate the so-called conditions of the Battle of Agincourt, for those of you who know your historical battles, where all the great cavalry units got bogged down in mud and were finding it exceedingly difficult to reach the English forces. They were the French forces, and the English just wrapped around them from either side and hailed down shots and wiped out a significantly larger, again, if you go with the official story from the victors, larger army of French knights. And he was basically recreating those circumstances by using goblins as mud. And I think that's it.
That's a very funny way to put it. Yeah.
He's brilliant. He's using goblins as mud, because he doesn't rate them as fighters, but he does rate their tactical utility, which is to bog down the cavalry charge, the ogre charge, because we know when ogres charge, it's like a steam train thumping into you. They gain strength bonuses on the charge for good reason. They thump in and they wade through, but there's so many goblins that charge will be slowed almost down to tepid step-by-step wading through, allowing all of the elite troops to then pick off the ogres at their own rate, with the ogres no longer having their mighty advantage of weight and strength and momentum. The momentum is gone. The momentum instead is with the greenskins. It's not just a cunning plan. It is a very good plan. And it's a plan that, should it succeed, is going to be pretty goddamn impressive.
Yeah. And to be very fair to Urk, it damn nearly does. Of that, when Greasus' army, when they show up and they look up and they see the slopes of the Firemouth, a lot of the tyrants are so pissed because Urk has covered it in all of his, like, he's deliberately made it as insulting as possible. He wants to piss off the ogres. He wants them. And Greasus, it notes he is force marched the ogres. They're tired. When they get there, they're hungry. And when they look up, all the tyrants start to go for the charge. And Greasus roars for everyone to stop. And as it's honestly one of the most impressive things that he's ever done, of that the tyrants stop.
And he calls a war council?
Yeah, he calls a council. He goes, meeting, time out.
Oh, tyrants, to me!
Yeah.
Brilliant.
And probably for like the first and only time in ogre history, there is a war council of the tyrants.
And what I particularly like about this is there's just a little small description of this one, but it gives you an idea of what Greasus is by this point. It's very easy to say that he's the clever one who's managed to properly control the ogres in a fashion that allows them to come up with a cunning plan or something like that. And yeah, you can say all that, but it's the physical description that's given. And it shows why the tyrants did stop. Imagine these are all the biggest ogres of their tribes. They're the ones that have come to take over their tribes. They are all, each and every one of them, storied ogres who have done big things to get big names. And all of these tyrants, having heard Greasus, come to him, and he dwarfs them. By this point in his career, he is so much bigger, not just in girth, but in height. They look small beside him. By this point, he is genuinely an Overtyrant in terms of his overall size. He understands what it is to rule ogres, and it's to be bigger, louder, and more impressive than any of them. And by this point in his career, he is. He just is. He's no longer someone trying to make his name. He is here to consolidate his rule, not to make it. And we get it by his physical description, that for all these great ogres are each individually terribly impressive, beside the Overtyrant, they do not appear it. They look like normal ogres in the same way that the normal ogres are dwarfed by them. He is that much bigger. And it's one of the reasons that both the miniature and the rather disappointing Total War model, I suppose, doesn't quite match the true majesty of what this particular Overtyrant can do. And this is, of all the events we've had, and as Ryan made it quite clear, arguably one of the most spectacular, because they come. He is now, honestly, the Overtyrant. This isn't he's claiming it. He is the Overtyrant, because they stop and they come. They are in a near religious fervor at this point to stop what's happening up there. Nevertheless, the vast majority come to his side.
Yep. So they have their war council, and Greasus, much like Urk, has a fairly genius but fairly straightforward strategy.
Straightforward plan.
Which he looks up, and Greasus, to his full credit, figures out what Urk's plan is. Like, he figures it out immediately. And he says, all right, we're going to stop for the night. We're going to eat. And then in the morning, I want those of you that have big beasties, all beasties to the front. And you're going to charge them. If he wants to surround us, fine. Let's make it hard for him. And so the tyrants go, okay. And in the morning, every single monster, all of the monsters they have, they're giants, they're stonehorns, they're thunder tusks, things we don't even have the names of, all of their cavalry, the Mournfangs and the Rhinox riders and all this other stuff form an immense wedge at the front of the army, and they just charge straight up the slopes.
Brilliant. So we've got ourselves an orc who's used to facing off against ogres. And ogres often have these supplementary troops. They're big cavalry or the big giant-y things. It's just the big stuff that sits at the edge, but they are in the minority. They are the extra that you deal with often after you've dealt with the ogres. And what he does is he takes each and every single one of these minorities in each tribe and pulls them together to create a new majority. So the thing that Urk is used to killing, ogres, are not what he's facing. He is facing an army that to ogres looks like giants, and to greenskins looks like giants.
Yeah.
It's just huge. And the goblins are not just mud anymore. They're more like a carpet, something that one can easily just stomp straight across, meaning that Urk's core plan is almost entirely invalidated.
Yeah. Now, to Urk's credit, it's still, while the big thing that helps is the goblins are so terrified due to these creatures that a lot of them just start breaking running, which ruins the whole mud plan. But luckily, he does have night goblins, and the night goblins are fucking suicidal. And so the night goblins get mushrooms. The night goblins get unleashed earlier than intended. Though hilariously, there's a note that the fanatics, which if you've ever read a Warhammer story, you know that whenever the fanatic part happens, it always describes the fanatics go out and they unleash devastation. But in this, it literally says that they just immediately get run over, which is hilarious. But they slam all the way through and they reach the Black Orcs who are hiding up at the back. And the Black Orcs go, well, shit. And they start having to fight. And
early.
Yeah, the rest of the wall immediately starts collapsing in because that was the plan. But now the Black Orcs are busy. And Greasus and the rest of the ogres follow up, and the fighting begins in earnest. And this fighting lasts for a while. It is a long, drawn-out, brutal display. And notice, like, the cavalry and all the monsters and stuff, eventually they get cut down by Urk and his Black Orc legions. Like, they win against the tide of titans.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. The Black Orcs that are sitting at the top, the text is pretty clear in terms of how the battle unfolds, and that is that the orcs, just the orcs, massively outnumber the ogres.
Yeah, it's like
6 to 1 or something like that. Yeah, there's like so many of them. And the ogres are coming rushing up while the monsters The giant stuff is dealing with the Black Orcs at the top. As it turns out, the opposite. The Black Orcs are dealing with them. But it takes a full third of the Black Orc number to finally put them down. And it says quite clearly, if they had been just a little bit faster, if they had managed to push through those enormous things and then crushed down, the ogres would have been slaughtered. But they didn't. They got caught up with those monsters, meaning that it turned into an absolute bloodbath on both sides. It was horrendous. But, you know, both greenskins and ogres are all kind of, I wouldn't say necessarily happy with, because not all of them will be happy, but most of them are delighted. This is exactly what they're there for. The furious ogres on one side, cleansing their holy mountain, and on the other side, the greenskins who are in pretty much their equivalent of heaven. This is their Ragnarok. They're living in one constant state of seeking Ragnarok, dying in battle. Yeah, totally, Ragnarok. And they're like walloping around, having the time of their relatively now short lives, as most of them are being stomped. But it's a massively bloody battle and quite horrible.
Yeah, and this builds up to, as both sides are just grinding into each other over the course of hours. Greasus is in the thick of it. And there's notes about him like swinging the scepter of the Titans and taking out like entire ranks of Black Orcs. And the scepter of the Titans, which we haven't had a chance to talk about up to this point, is rather depressingly, in my opinion, not a very detailed piece.
It's really annoying.
Yeah, because it's called the Scepter of the Titans. So you think, oh, well, then it must be a weapon of the Sky Titans.
Sky Titans.
It might be. It very well could be.
I presume it is.
Yeah, but it is ridiculously ornate. It's a giant golden club studded with diamonds and jewels and gems of all kinds, and it is heavily enchanted, which does suggest that it likely came from the Sky Titans, as they were masters of enchantment. But it could have also come from Cathayans. It could have come from Zhao Ming, for all we know, who's also a master alchemist and enchanter. But in any event, this fucking thing makes the wielder as powerful as a Sky Titan, is quite literally what it says, which apparently means strength 10, which is the highest Warhammer can conceive of.
Yep.
That is, like, for the record, a greater demon of Khorne souped up on adrenaline cocaine is at best strength 9.
Usually strength 8.
Yes. Yeah, most Bloodthirster are strength 8. A really scary Bloodthirster is strength 9. Strength 10 is bonkers.
Proper bonkers. Yeah. And as this is all going on, because it is worth noting, the entirety of the mountain goes boom. As the god speaks and lava spews into the air. Ash falls down on all sides. This battlefield is proper heavy metal, with lava pouring down some parts of it, ash falling everywhere, constant fiery explosions, huge rocks falling out of the sky, ogres bellowing, orcs whining. It's awesome. This is a proper nasty battle. And yeah, we're about to have an epic conflict.
Yeah. So this builds up to both sides are pretty exhausted. They have been fighting for literally hours, and because Warhammer battles always last way longer than they have any right to, and which, you know, reflects how playing the tabletop feels sometimes. But it builds up to the elite cores going towards each other, with Urk, Iron Skull, and his most elite Black Orcs, his personal bodyguard, angling towards Greasus Goldtooth and his surrounding Iron Guts. And as the two sides meet, we do get a fairly hilarious note about Greasus, which is that as he's fighting, there is an iconic moment where the battle standard bearer, so like the big banner, the personal champion of Urk, gets a little too close to Greasus, and Greasus does this big underhanded whop, and he hits him so hard that it says that not only is the banner just a shatter, but the orc wielding it goes flying into the air all the way up over the caldera and down to the volcano. And all the ogres go, wow!
Love it.
Yeah, which, but if you look at the Total War version that they made for the Firemouth, makes it extra hilarious because they made it much bigger than the author of that part probably was thinking, because the actual like core, like the heart of the Firemouth is like so fucking high up there that orc would have been a dot by the time he went over the rim. But anyway, so this is what finally leads to Urk, Iron Skull coming at Greasus, and the two of them clash. And Urk is a monster. Like, he cuts down several of the best Iron Guts, just obliterating them as he cleaves his way towards Greasus. And Urk, for those, if you're wondering, because you're probably thinking this, Urk, in many ways, I'm going to say it, is basically a better Grimgor Ironhide because he's smarter. Yeah. He's a lot smarter. He actually knows how to use tactics, which Grimgor never bothers with.
Now Grimgor just charges.
Yeah.
Bless his soul.
And he's got two axes, and he's just cleaving his way. And as they get close to each other, Greasus does something unexpected. Because he's fucking Greasus. Which, because you may think, oh, it's going to be like a prolonged epic duel battle. Blah, blah, blah. Nah. Greasus knows that's what Urk is going to expect. So when Urk comes at him, instead of like swinging the scepter or going defensive or whatever, he drops his weapon.
Mic drop.
And he just stands up and grabs him. He literally just lunges at him. And he moves so fast that all Urk has time to do is to just fling his axes into Greasus' chest.
So yeah, I think it's worth noting. Imagine if you can. If I put my hands in front of the screen, you can see there's our Overtyrant. Okay, he's big. Here is our Black Orc. He's probably about 9 foot tall. Okay, our Overtyrant is huge, and he is lounging, being carried up, all the rest of it, and he drops the weightiest thing that he's got, which is the thing that makes him as strong as he arguably is. He drops it, and boom, comes forward with speed. The Orc doesn't hold back, launches his axes directly into his chest, and Greasus by this point is grinning a Goldtooth grin, because he knows that no axe, no matter how magical, is going to stop him. It's going to take a lot more than an axe blow to his chest, because he's an ogre. They take this like it's nothing. It hits, and the Orc's already lost. He should have dodged. He should have gone away. He should have tried to get out of the way, but he attacked because he's an orc. And Greasus knew that was happening, and his hands wrap around the Black Orc. And his hands are that big. And the Black Orc, for all of his size, is tiny by comparison. He's basically a child. There's almost nothing it can do. Crack. And he starts to squeeze.
Yep. And Greasus Goldtooth squeezes so hard that the sounds of battle begin to fade away because of this horrible sound that starts echoing over the volcano as everybody looks. And Greasus, it says he literally squeezes all of the fluid out of Urk's body, to the point it notes that Greasus crumples him into such a ball of metal and flesh that Greasus' arms are trembling with effort. And
he doesn't do this over like 2 or 3 seconds. He does this in front of everyone over minutes, just squeezing and squeezing and squeezing and squeezing until there's an unrecognizable pulp dropped to the ground. And as we all know, the best way to take out a greenskin horde is to take out its head. Because that is where all of the focus is. The Wa of the Orcs gathers around an individual. It almost empowers the individual. But equally, all of the greenskins that are follow because of that individual. And without it, the entire horde becomes entirely headless. And a headless Orc horde is defeated.
Yep. And to be fair, watching your leader get literally crushed like a fucking soup can in a compressor, I would probably get the fuck out of there too. So the greenskins shatter. They scatter. And the ogres have, Greasus declares, a great feast, because he's the fucking Overtyrant. And only the Overtyrant can call a great feast. And all the tribes go, "Hey!" And they have a great roast of greenskin flesh and they eat for 2 weeks. Now, one of the things that's actually really notable about this battle, about, once again, the cleverness of Greasus, is that not only does he, like, absolutely this is his moment. This is his legend cemented. But he also quite literally gets the undying loyalty of a very, very core group, which is the Firebellies.
Firebellies. He gets the Firebellies. That's a big thing. The Firebellies are basically, imagine the religious loons of any society. That's your Firebellies. And they have an entire god that supports them. A god which, by the way, is now gouting lava all over the place.
Which is like the god acknowledges him.
Like, exactly. And that's exactly how it gets interpreted. But again, I think it's worth noting here, because we should take a slight pause, because we are viewing this and telling this story to you like humans, because we are. Yeah. When we say the gods are acknowledging them, there is nobody saying that. What they're doing is they're bellowing, because that's what ogres do. They're not saying, he acknowledges us. That's a bit too much of a long-winded speech. Indeed, there's a lovely little bit right at the end of the description where Greasus gives one of the biggest speeches that any ogre would normally give. And I will quote, are we ready? This is considered a long-winded, too long speech. Ogres communicate like this. Not like this. Because he says, and I quote, today the orcs, tomorrow the world, let them all tremble. By that point, half of the ogres are all like, bored. Bored. Seriously, get to the point. Ogres are not like orcs. Orcs are arguably much more intelligent in some ways than ogres. Ogres are loud, bellowing creatures, very simple. They don't go in for not only speeches, but sentences normally, unless they're in a calmer moment and attempting to communicate something. But when they're all up, they're really going at high dough. It's just roaring. That's it. They roar.
And Firebellies is very impressive because they tend to breathe fire when they roar.
Oh, yeah. So you can imagine thousands of roaring, consuming ogres as all these orcs, greenskins, giants, trolls, everything else that's been killed are scraped together. And they're all consuming them, sometimes whole because they're small, tearing bits off them. It's a blood orgy as they just tear through everything. A massive feast with, at the top of it, the Overtyrant eating the best of it all and consolidating himself, not just as the Overtyrant, but as the genuinely supported Overtyrant by most of the tyrants in the entirety of the mountains, and with the support of the crazy religious loons whom he had just saved the asses of. And again, he grins. And he grins because this isn't just something that's happened and he's bellowing and he's won. He grins because he's clever. He grins because he knows he's done it. He grins because he's won.
Okay, we're going to knock out some more Super Chat stuff, and then we're going to get into some final little things about him. Senate Overlord, how does the title of Tyrant pass if the previous Tyrant was killed in battle? Do a bunch of candidates just fight each other over the position? Yep. Yes, there's an order to it. It's not just like a absolute brawl, but there would be a series of challenges and systems that go. The ogres have ways to deal with it, but it will involve fighting.
Yeah. Each tribe has got its own traditions, and those traditions generally involve already knowing who the biggest and baddest is. Because they are. Yeah. And if you want to challenge the biggest and baddest, go for it. If not, a new tyrant will be very quickly sworn in. As everyone just turns to the next biggest one and goes, "Way, let's go!"
Yeah, basically. Archmage Eldred, hope when Ogre Maw tribes get their update, they get a character as interesting as Greasus. So the rumor that I had heard from someone that I genuinely believe very, very well, because they've had a really good consistent thing, is that we're getting basically the daughter of Greasus. It's not Greasus, but there's a Greasus equivalent, which is a character called Glob Glittermaw.
Glob.
Yeah, and apparently his daughter is supposed to get a miniature and be like the big new Overtyrant.
Cool, I'd be cool with that.
Yeah. Biofoot, where did the Empire learn to make that crown? That's right, it's the fucking fishmen. Why did they do it? To get ogre fishmonger wives.
I can't believe Biofoot that I didn't bring the fishermen into that, because quite clearly it was them who started it all.
Yeah, every conspiracy starts with fishermen. Seth 45er, I thought that Throg's crown was originally meant to be Greasus's, but Throg got in the way of that caravan. That would be a hilarious story. The idea that they made one and they lost it, and then they had to make another one.
I actually quite like that. I think there's a good story in that.
That's fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I quite like that.
Ryan Von Ager, do you think it's possible ogres gain aspects of those they consume, specifically other ogres? In essence, the previous tyrant is reborn. I don't think so.
No, it's not described anywhere. If that was a thing, then you almost certainly would have had some sort of, much like greenskins have some form of racial memory. We know that they become aware of what came before. The Great Green somehow communicates with them. The ogres would almost certainly have had this written into their background in a few places, showing that the Overtyrant had the knowledge of where local caves were, where important stuff was, because he'd consumed something else that knew all of that. Would it make a cool detail? Sure, it would. But as it stands, it's not one that's written into the background.
There are groups that exist like that. Like there's actually notes that the monkey warriors of the Mountains of Heaven eat the hearts of their enemies, which the Cathayans are like, about because of stuff like that. Stephen Lucas, prefer the version wizards didn't know under good or evil. I don't know what that's trying to say.
I'm sorry, Stephen. I'm not quite sure what you're saying there. Prefer the version where wizards didn't know. Not quite sure what you're saying there. If you want to try and post that one again, I'll look out for it.
Diamond Rush, just want to drop by and thank you. I landed a job as a writer as a big newspaper, partially thanks to YouTube being a source of creativity. You rock. Oh, that's
you rock. Well done, and congratulations.
Cool. Yeah,
I'm
big
very
congrats.
pleased you got a new job. Super cool.
Darius Rose, Greasus versus Grimgor is the biggest dud for me in the end times. It was a pretty big one. It really
upsets me.
We'll get into it here right at the end. Tyrant 25. Greasus is said to dislike the Chaos Dwarfs. Any idea why? Yes, this is something we actually get more in the. There's like some mentions of the Tarmacon stuff, but it's reinforced in Total War, and it makes sense if you know the history of the Chaos Dwarfs and the ogres, which is that there was a huge fucking war between the Chaos Dwarfs and the ogres when the ogres were starting to kind of migrate down to the Darklands, where the Chaos Dwarfs basically said, haha, no. And impressively, in the Ogre Kingdom's army book, it literally says that the ogres get their shit rocked. They lose badly. And the Chaos Dwarfs are not above enslaving them by any means, but they're just really fucking good at killing ogres. And ogres, from Greasus' standpoint, they are a threat to his power. For keeping his trade route open, they're one of the biggest antagonists to the trade routes. Of people are either having to pay them off or they're getting captured by them. They also help supply his rival tribes. The Ironskin tribe gets lots of nasty shit from the Chaos Dwarfs to make them a genuine threat, and they're way up in the north. They don't like listening to Greasus. Gark Ironskin is a notable rival of his. They cause him a lot of problems, and they're much harder to influence for him than other groups. So it makes a lot of sense. I would leave it at that.
Chaos Dwarves are very capable. Ogres aren't. Ogres are idiots. And it takes someone like Greasus to turn them into a cohesive force. The Maw has both turned them into an extraordinary threat, but also weakened them in many respects. They are probably not what they were beforehand. Ogres are terrifying. And the Chaos Dwarves recognize this and enslave them. When you've got ogres on the other side, plus everything the Chaos Dwarves have, the Chaos Dwarves know what they're doing.
Darius Rose, Andy, how would Paul Heyman be as Greasus' announcer? Since he's loud, sounds epic, and by his own words, a full-figured gal, best girl in WWE.
He would be too talkative for most. most ogres, what they need for an announcer is just, and then everyone, and then occasionally, the biggest, Drake Eater, that's their idea of a speech. And like a couple of words at best in Grumbarth, followed by all manner of screams. Humans do not do very well when it comes to communication with ogres when they're at their peak of excitement.
Yep. Super Orlock, if you don't think being hit with a belly flop by a bullberry gun is harmless, I implore you to fight an elephant seal. Please don't, you will die.
Donk! Oh!
Sick River Guy, when describing an ogre tribe in a particular area, what elements or aspects should be noted and explained? Names, symbol, what are the hallmarks? So the biggest thing is all ogre tribes will have like a symbol that usually has a circular-ish motif to it because it usually invokes the maw. They will often have Honestly, that's like the biggest thing. They will have a maw tooth that will usually have some kind of, it would be made out of a unique composite materials or unique material, or have a unique shape or design, which is core to their tribal identity. And then they'll have their name, which usually ties back to usually a singular individual who is kind of the originator of whatever that cultural thing they're copying is. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I would probably add, if you were describing your own tribe, a sentence to show why that tribe's different to anyone else. That'll do.
Darius Rose, is ogre culture similar to elephant seal life? Yeah, kind of, to be honest.
Sure.
Sartikar, is he the richest character or richest faction?
One of. I mean, he's very rich.
Yeah.
But it's a very, it's a richness that almost means nothing because it's a great accumulation.
He's new money, so he's probably not the richest.
Yeah, and it's not wealth beyond the piles of gold and stuff that he's collected. It's nothing that's actually being used to any great effect.
Darius Rose, could a possible interesting story of perhaps instead being a tyrant being replaced by his son? It's an ogre tyrant replacing his or her lover. That wouldn't, I don't think by ogre standards that would be seen as particularly extraordinary.
No, I don't think that'd be extraordinary at all. I think that's something that would happen. But again, you've got to place down the clear part where ogres typically don't challenge by, say, for example, slitting someone's throat in the night. So the old, the lover slips into the bed, kills them, and now no, that would not do. You would need to challenge them, and most ogres would challenge with lots of bellowing and shouting, and it reaches the point where it's now, I'm almost angry, I'm taking you out now. But yes, I do. It's as good a story as any.
And now a unique, fun big name might come out of it, because like Ken Eater is a big name, which is ogres who have killed and eaten their siblings or parents.
All their kin, exactly. Yeah. Good times.
Sick River Guide, how small can a tribe of ogres be? What to call it? I don't know what the name would be for a small gathering.
As you want, because ogres who claim they're a tribe are.
Yeah, there's a Wolfrup tribe that's like, I think it's like 18 ogres.
Yeah, which is bullshit in terms of being a tribe. Most of them are probably numbering in hundreds.
Yeah.
Several thousands, a few far bigger.
The Wrestling Theater, I swear to God, the way you describe the Ogre Kingdom sounds like they operate like the old wrestling territories of the NWA circa 1983. They do.
They do. Yeah, you're not wrong.
Joe Numbers, now I want Ogre Olympics, sprints, face break, eating challenge, wrestling system, Mongolian wrestling is a thing, breaking tougher and tougher stuff. Okay, so just as a quick fun thing, the things they get up to, you've got, I think it's called face cracking, which is headbutting each other.
Headbutting each other.
There's also a different face associated challenge, which is, I think it's called like boulder bashing, where they only are allowed to use their head, and they have to break a boulder as large as possible. There is a particular tribe that is really good at it, but they're also known for being the dumbest ogres because they have so many concussions.
For good reason.
Gut barging is a relatively non-violent challenge where they literally charge at each other with their guts and they slam into each other. Whoever's still standing wins. There's eating challenges. When they go down into the pit, there are many different. There's wrestling. There is also like your death fights and stuff. There's a lot of different kinds of competitions.
Yeah. Ogres like proving they're better than others. It's a core part of their mentality, their psychology. And any opportunity they have to show that they're bigger and better than someone else is genuinely something they will pursue. So the idea of Ogre Olympics is very in character, although much less organized.
Yeah, Mr. Lintucka, glad to catch you live. Sotek, I rewatched your lore video on Turbocut Brothers Slash. It inspired me to create my own Slash champion. He has marble skin, is half snake. Shocking, I know. Yeah, that's right. Awesome. Martin Crescent, I always thought it was based on Greasus, the king of
I brought this comment up because I wanted to, because I actually checked the king up, because I didn't know this one. And he is an ancient, a classical king who was famous for being exceedingly rich, and ultimately his pride bringing him down. And I think there could be a link. We'd have to speak to the author, because it very much, when I read it, I was like, yeah, that's a pretty good one. It makes the name Greasus sound perhaps a little bit more, it's a pun rather than it's just a terrible name. So I want this to be true.
Yeah,
I'm
great.
not sure it is.
Darius Rowe, how scary is Karaka Break Mountain for a tyrant? He was pretty spooky.
He's pretty spooky. He's pretty scary.
Yeah, he was reasonably spooky. I mean, he was, he wasn't Greasus, but he was, he caused Tarmakon a number of problems.
Oh yeah. He's a big tyrant. Is he the biggest? No, but is he scary? Yes.
Yeah, Mr. Lotunka with long black hair, piercing green eyes. His ability lets him grow
this
bones.
Is the
The Slash character.
Yeah.
His ability lets him grow bones, rip them out, throw them like spears. It causes them extreme pain and pleasure, and he's giving the gift of his pain to others. Love it. That's great.
Good one, Mr. Lent. I didn't catch that all the name, but yes, great.
Lentelka.
Lentelka, there we go. Thank you.
Ricky Chapman, we remember making a previous Ogre Tyrant NPC, Lard Butt Green Jaw, Rat Eater, Mountain Biter, Dragon Rider, Elf Chewer, the ridiculously fat. Dragon Rider? When did you... Ogre riding a dragon, that's horrifying.
It's a bit.
Watchdog, do ogres have specialized units for certain foes? They're man-eaters, basically.
Yeah, not really. I suggest go jump into the Ogre Army List for 8th edition. Take a wee read through all the entries there, and you'll get a good idea of what each of them are. But they're not particularly specialized to take out one thing, other than, say, hunters taking out animals, or the man-eaters being just broadly very good.
All right, Darius Rose, could you still say maybe the crown maybe influences his most useful personality traits, and he still has the drive to become Overtyrant? It's likely he had the drive before the crown, but the crown gave him
all ogres probably sort of have that drive to be bigger and better than everyone else. Yep. What it gave him was the ability to take it. So it's exacerbating his predilections rather than necessarily... I mean, it's not necessarily even exacerbating it. It's giving him the capability to just cave into what most ogres want to do anyway.
Zero Time is Tyrant a Grumbarth word? No.
No.
Or a word imposed on them by others? Yes. If there's, does that imply Grumbarth sounds like Latin? No.
No. Grumbarth, we've got lots of examples of Grumbarth, and it's all like nuke, boof, blah, bloof, blah, bark, gurk, blah, blah. It's all very simple, short, type noises. Tyrant, Overtyrant, the gutty, whatever you want to say as a descriptor for a big name, all of that is translation from their original Grumbarth tongue, which is a surprisingly complex tongue if you take a look at all of the various big names that you can get, some of which convey some pretty complicated ideas.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to put a quick pause on that because we got to finish Greasus' story, then we'll get to the... Y'all have been very generous today. Thank you very, very much. A lot of big Derek, Jesus Christ. Thank you very much. I hope you're being responsible with your finances. So to kind of get through the rest of Greasus' story in a timely fashion of that... So we've talked about how he gets most of his big names. A lot of them are fairly obvious. Like we have the whole like trade lord because he establishes trade with many different nations. Notably, that being something that we get in Total War, which is really cool, is his relationship with Zhao Ming, the Iron Dragon.
Yeah, that needs to be discussed.
Yeah, now Zhao Ming, we've talked about him at length in many different streams, is he really, really likes the other races, and he likes spending time talking with humans and ogres, all this stuff. And one of the things we get in Total War that's really cool is we actually get a series of quotes that show that Zhao Ming and Greasus have a very amicable relationship. That Zhao Ming has visited him and has spoken with him one-on-one, which is kind of crazy of that he didn't send advisors or envoys. And we get this very funny quote, I love it, from Zhao Ming to Greasus, where he basically says something along the lines of, it's Zhao Ming, it starts with him laughing, and then he says, it sounds like you and I have had similar tumultuous relationships with our fathers.
Daddy issues.
Yeah, however, unlike you, I don't think I'm capable of devouring, I can't eat all of him because he's too big. Which like earns like a like kind of a that's so sad from Greasus, which is great. Like it would make sense that the two of them would actually get along when you delve into a lot of the personality aspects about them, of also that they aid one another immensely. Sheng Yang is literally the endpoint for the Ivory Road, and Zhao Ming trades a lot with Greasus. There's a lot of goodies that are exchanged between those two. There's a lot of wealth there. There's a lot of power there. And we also know that Zhao Ming is starting to be affected quite a lot by the Great Maw in recent decades. And that likely makes him I would suggest it makes him more likely to understand and get along with ogres as probably an unintentional side effect of that strange corruption, whatever you want to call it. But there's a very funny bromance there that I love very dearly. I'm really glad that Total War gave that characterization where they didn't need to, especially because that means it got GW approval, which is great and awesome, and I love it.
Yeah, so if we're running with our theory that the crown is designed to create the situation that it currently has and allows him, with the intellect he has, to do what he does, then you could even argue that the entire bromance is a setup to get, for example, the Gold Order into Cathay.
Yeah, it very well could be. Like, it could be, there's a whole funny thing of it could be the Empire trying to use Greasus as a pawn, and you could also argue that it's Zhao Ming knowing what the crown is and trying to counterfeit it in his own way.
I would prefer not to do that, because the dragons are made perfect all the time, and I'm always looking for ways to undermine them being great. And the only flaws that the dragons appear to have are their own personal flaws, and they're never outwitted. They're always great. They're always perfect.
That's fair.
Having the Empire actually getting, because we know that if we go with the Total War game, the Gold Order's right over there, or the Supreme Patriarch of Colleges of Magic is there. Now, it doesn't need to be the Gold Order per se. It could be the Colleges of Magic through the Empire have a plan to get in there and effectively extend the reach of the Empire, which Total War totally supports. And the idea that Greasus Goldtooth is the route through which they can do that, and they're now influencing that dragon through his bromance, all makes sense with the politics that we've got in Total War 3. And it allows us to build a story that's not just, why is he over there? Because they're all alchemists, yeah? Let's just start him over there because the Empire's too full. Because the Empire is too full. And that's ultimately the only reason that we really have for it. But if we start looking at the artifact that Greasus has, suddenly an entire story starts to be unplucked.
Yep. This also ties into various things. Greece, of course, did introduce gold as a precious resource to the ogres. Literally, before Greasus, gold was a soft metal that wasn't good for eating. It was kind of shiny, but who cares? But Greasus is the one that introduces to the ogres the idea that, as a whole, that it can be exchanged for goods and services, including more meat. And Greasus is wildly successful. Like, considering that he's only been Overtyrant for like 35 years by the time,
hardly any time.
Like, he is insanely successful in a very short period of time.
Yep. And yes, and there's no other way of putting it, because we are obviously reaching time. So I think we need to be quite clear with what Greasus manages to gather after his great war that consolidates his power as the Overtyrant. Not only does he now have an extraordinary influence over all of the ogres, he then basically says, hey, you know, all of your absolute desire to get meat for everything, fuck that. I want gold and wealth. I need that. So that is what you're going to be getting. With that, I will get you the meat you need. So don't worry, we'll be feeding you. But this is how I get it. So you've got to go out there and get it for me. And effectively, he changes ogre culture, at least the ogre culture around all of the Silk Road. And he moves it from being largely a meat economy and a big thing that I can hit someone economy into a standard gold-driven economy that anyone can buy into. And that is quite extraordinary.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that's more correct. Yeah, Greasus mentions that he ate his father as a way to deal with it, and Zhao Ming starts laughing, which his retainers are like,
Poor Zhao Ming, he's going somewhere.
Yeah. Okay. Last couple things I'll touch on with Greasus of note. Greasus does canonically throw the biggest, best parties. He is being Overtyrant. He is the only authority that can call the Great Feasts, which Greasus's Great Feasts are beyond famous. When he calls a Great Feast, it's supposed to summon most of the tyrants that will listen to him anyway. But they want to go because he throws these huge things that last for weeks of just constant eating, and he gives out gifts. He one of the things about Greasus is, despite the fact he's very gluttonous, but he's not as greedy as you might suspect.
No, I mean, his special rules is even, I have paid to get what I want. He is known for his largesse. He will pay his way out of any problem.
Yeah, he gives and gives and gives. And this also, it notes in the 8th edition book, this is a tactic he uses to take out rivals. of that people that cause him problems meet bloody and unfortunate ends at his great feast, which once again is not very ogre-y of him.
He's an interesting ogre.
Yeah, and the last thing I'll note is one of the things that's actually really fun back in the 6th edition book that doesn't get mentioned in 8th edition, but comes back for Total War, is that Greasus uses more than just like money to bribe and influence people. If you go back and read the 6th edition, his original entry, it talks about the way that he influences units on the battlefield is that he kidnaps people's families. He finds out like what goodies they want, like what artifacts are precious to them, cultural artifacts or powerful artifacts, and offers it to them to turn them to his side or make them, misinterpret orders. He's a clever, scheming,
really clever,
conniving motherfucker.
Yeah, which is not what ogres do. If ogres want to influence someone, they offer them a party or hit them. Pretty much, and that's it. They're not very subtle creatures. They're intelligent in their own way. They're very capable hunters, very capable fighters, but they are not very, very imaginative. They don't think much more about what's in front of them directly. This shows a depth of imagination and capability that other ogres just don't demonstrate.
Yeah, the idea of like going onto a battlefield and being in a regiment, and then like Greasus, like you see him on the battlefield, and he has your family like being held captive, and like since like a little Noblar that's like either you do what I want or I will kill and eat your entire family. Like Jesus.
I think the only other thing that I'd note about Greasus, and there's quite a few things we could note, but the only other thing that I do think is worth noting is that he makes big and deep use of the Noblar. So that's the small green spin species that work with the ogres. And he uses them to keep account of all of the wealth that he has, because Noblars are pretty smart in comparison to ogres, and he uses them to not just carry him around as a demonstration of how awesome he is, and I'm not entirely sure how that would work given how heavy he is, but don't think about it too much. He uses them to effectively act as his accountants. And he's the one who's dealing with, they're the ones that are dealing with much of the actual embassies. So Noblars are often the ones doing the talking, not the ogres, because ogres don't make natural diplomats.
Yeah, I'm struggling to remember his name, but in the White Dwarf article that gave us the Noblar horror rules, there is a specific Noblar that works for Greasus.
I can't remember his name either.
I can't remember his name. Hopefully someone in chat can remember it real fast. But there is a named Noblar that works for him, who is very good at finding things and keeps track of a lot of stuff from his money. But he also enacts Greasus's less ogre-approved schemes. Like he's literally his little henchman.
Yeah, he's the secretary.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. All right, we get through all our last super chats. Let's just go.
We got Blaze. Darius, for create overtime stream. That's a very fun idea.
That would be a good one.
Yeah, I'd love a female ogre that perhaps is set in the war against the dragon ogres, defeats another father/mother figure of them like Sigmar did. Also wielding a giant herd stone as a weapon would be cool. That would be hilarious.
That'd be pretty cool. Yeah, I like that, Darius.
There's actually a particular time period I could think of where that would make sense. Darius, Paul Heyman gave him the crown. Hot take. That is a very hot take.
Well, if you want to make a Paul Heyman equivalent, yeah, you could definitely do that. I mean, after all, he wins the great bout, and maybe it'd even start off as a great belt that he wins, that can then be strapped around his head like a crown, and then nailed into place.
Is the Marathi of WWE/humanity?
Sure.
Darius, the female tyrant has a pet Noblar with a handlebar mustache/mullet like Rhea Ripley and Dominique Mysterio. He gets the shit and mommy saves him. Why not? Darius, you're building such a fascinating universe. Darius, what is your favorite tribe? The Mountain Eaters, Thunder Guts, or Rock Skulls for you? It depends on the day, to be honest.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I remember writing a lot about the cross clubs back in the day.
The cross clubs are fun.
Sons of the Mountain are obviously cool.
The Bloodfists are really fun.
Yeah. I can't remember them all. This is really bugging me.
Yeah, for today, I'm gonna go with the Iron Skins. I love the Iron Skins. I hope we get Gark Iron Skin in game at some point.
Yeah, they'll do. They'll do. Yeah, Iron Spades. Let's go with that since we don't have a lot of time.
There's Rose. Greasus is basically Ric Flair, dirtiest player. He is indeed. Tyrant. Greasus is Sigmar, son of a tribal chief given a powerful artifact by an older empire, wields a bludgeoning weapon, unites the tribes, and defeats an enormous Black Orc Wah.
Correct.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
Yeah, it's the same story.
Jonathan King, theory. The scepter is Sky Titan made. It just enhances the grace ability of each race. So for the ogres, it enhances their strength. But for another, it may do something different. So who knows how it affected the Sky Titans. There's an interesting note that the actual ensorcelment, one of the ensorcelments on the scepter that wasn't representing the rules for some reason, but it gets called out in 6th edition that it has enchantments of command.
Yeah, making it a better ruler. Yeah.
Which may imply that it was originally designed as a token of rulership to like.
I mean, it's a scepter. It's a classic symbol. Yeah.
It's just the ogres just happen to use it as a big beat stick, which is hilarious. Nathan Hull, hey, did you name the Black Orc yet? Merc? Perfect.
Accurate.
Lucas. The meme image of wizards don't have a concept of good or evil. Old school don't ethics. They do. They made the crown because they could and did things. So I'm guessing saying that they did.
Just because you could, then surely you would keep it.
Yeah.
Unless it's somehow cursed or it's made for a reason or something. It seems so much more purposeful. This appears to be a relatively an ogre, so thus not very imaginative, is impressed with being so fawned over, takes the crown, and then suddenly realizes that the world is a far bigger and more interesting place than he first considered.
I saw someone ask earlier, and I actually want to add to it very, very briefly, of like, someone was like, oh, why doesn't the college's magic do that with beastmen or greenskins? Because they wouldn't fall for it. That wouldn't interest them.
Yeah. Plus, greenskins and beastmen are already clever. You're not doing anything here. There is something specific about the ogres that are being added to here that makes them more capable to be dealt with. When it comes to WAG energy and the fact that the orcs are constantly fighting, you'd have to do an artifact that would cut through the Great Green. Good luck.
Yeah. All right. Mornington Crescent. I will find it. Give me just a minute. But Gaston, is your standard ogre big enough that a skin can fit in his backpack to learn related to a Wolfer campaign I'm planning? Yes, easily. Super easily.
Like so easily, yes. Perfect. Go for it, Gaston. That's lovely.
Yeah, an ogre man-eater with a skink that he keeps in his backpack is like, instead of a Nobblar, hilarious and would work great.
Love that.
Darius, an ogre tyrant beats a Primarch physically. Cope?
Maybe some of them, but probably not.
Yeah, I think a rare few could. Not the average one, though, I don't think.
Yeah.
Cole Patterson, and I was sure Greasus was based on Henry VIII.
I mean, it'd be an easy analogy to make.
Joe Numbers, all this ogre knowledge is great for my homebrew tribe, the Barkskins. They follow a herd of Gyron water buffalo on a massive river, fish monstrous catfish, specialize in hunters and fighting beastmen. That's perfect for AOS. That's great.
And it sounds vaguely Avatar as well. Kind of love it.
Feather Freaks, hello, Lore Legends. Has Andy had a chance to find that dwarf family rune for my tattoo?
So I could not find it, which is the sad response that I have. So then we're now in a position of create your own. So it's really going to be up to yourself as to exactly how you think that should land. I had a good look around, and I even looked through all my old Kalazid documents, and there isn't one that properly fits to that. So that's a toughie. I'm sorry, Feather Freaks.
Morning Crescent, in the end time, so this was his bit message. In the end time, should Goldtooth have received the Wind of Gold instead of Gelt? How much better would he have been as the Ogre of Trade? I don't think so. No. I don't think Shaman matches him.
No.
I think there are things...
Giving a Gelt is bullshit.
Yeah, there's a lot you could have done with Greasus, but I think it would have had more to do with like the story of the Maw, maybe exploring the consequences of his crown, the differences between like him and Scrag as expressions of the Maw. The Root of Land would be very close. Yeah, that could work.
Yeah, you basically have to use a rune for a purpose that it's not currently used for. So yeah, you could go with that. Quite like that.
Yeah, Super Orlock. What if the crown accidentally doesn't make him smarter, but blocks out the Maw's influence to a degree, allowing him to actually think clearly?
Super Orlock, you have already just preempted what I was going to conclude with.
Oh,
so well done. I do think that's quite a good idea, because what we could say is that instead, because we're now slightly over time, so we'll just eat into my intro with an answer here. My extra. So the extra, making up words now. Yes, is the long and short of it. The Maw did something to the ogres, and the ogres were terrifying before, and Greasus is terrifying in his own way, and perhaps that's exactly what it does. It blocks out that subtle whisper of the Maw and takes away something. It hasn't stopped his hungers. If anything, it's exacerbated them. So I think the answer to this is probably no. But what you can say is probably yes, is that it might have allowed them to, along with the Maw, also have what might have been their original intellectual base, which is probably going by the original description of what the ogres were. If we go back to Phil Kelly's first interviews and the blogs that went up on Games Workshop about the intelligence of a halfling, which is about the intelligence of a human, which is the intelligence that the artifact provides. So that is a fine conclusion, and I like it.
Darius Rose, in short, he's the one I admire the most. There you go. Paul Heyman, in short, your praising of my client has been satisfactory enough, and he is pleased. You shall be spared the wrath of our tribal chief.
Excellent.
Joe Numbers, Paul Heyman.
Hey, man!
/diplomat. That's
oh, Joe Numbers, that made me laugh. I love it.
That's very funny. Feather Freak, do ogres have a plumbing or latrine system in their caves? No. Waste use it for fertilizer to punch them method. No.
No.
Ogres, there is a note that when you have ogre tribes in like the caves and stuff, they will like defecate all that stuff into like the caverns and stuff among the mountains born, but they're not they have like
right. So here we go. I'm going to try to keep this super, super short. Different species have got different levels of what they accept in their surroundings. Humans don't like things like poo lying around because we contract diseases from it. Ogres don't. They can live in their own shit and they will have no problems at all. Now, putting it all in one place, sure. But do they care if there's shit lying in the middle of a hall? No, they don't. It doesn't make any difference to them at all. They're not going to catch a disease from a bit of poo. It's not an issue for them. So ogre society is, as far as humans are concerned, utterly filthy. In the same way that elves look at human society and go, fuck that, it stinks. Each species has got its own standards, and ogre standards are, by human comparisons, super low.
Yeah, just keep in mind, what do you think all those knobblers behind Greasus are having to do all the time? Just shoveling endlessly. Darius Road, again, thank you guys. Love you. Hey, no problem. Thank you for all the crazy support this stream. Like, oh my gosh, dude. I hope you're doing okay. And we're caught up. Woo.
Wow. Okay, so let's keep it super short.
Okay, there we go. Total War says their walls have a trench they all used to poop in. Hilarious.
That'll do. So my conclusion is going to be super short. Greasus is great. He is, as has been noted by more than one, but definitely one super chat, somewhat of an equivalent to Sigmar, to the Empire. Greasus is an ogre who you could argue is of equivalent worth, particularly when you consider the almost holy support that he has from the great Firemouth. He has bound the ogres together. He has completely changed the entirety of the ogre people so that they are no longer concerned with just conflict and eating, but they're also concerned with the building up of stuff, be that gold, be that something else. He's added currency to the ogre kingdoms, and this currency is used to great effect by Greasus to get what he wants. He's not above bribing. Oh, hell, he does that all the time. He's not above literally kidnapping and using that to get more money. You want your stuff back? You've got to pay for it. He understands the power of capitalism, and he's a capitalist ogre, but he's much more than that. Because the source of all of his intelligence, the source of who he is, comes from a magical artifact. Now, that magical artifact may be exacerbating a unique intelligence that's there already. It may be instead allowing him to access his higher thoughts that are suppressed by the Maw. It could be instead just simply giving him base human intellect. It doesn't matter what it's doing per se. What matters is where did it come from and how does he have it? And the answer is, it came from the Empire, and the Empire has done nothing more than profit from everything that it has given him. They now have their own trains making their way into Cathay. They don't need to just rely upon the Cathayan trains. Cathayan trade has weakened because of what Greasus Goldtooth has done. They dominated that trade. They had pretty much most of it, with the Tillians trying to break into it all over the place and largely failing. Now, the Empire has not just got through, they have their own embassies in the west of Cathay, not the east where all the ships go round to, the west of Cathay. Indeed, if we go with Total War, the Supreme Patriarch himself is over there promoting the Empire and furthering Empire knowledge. Whatever this artifact is, it seems pretty clear, if we build a story to help understand it all, that it was created by the Empire to make Greasus what he is. It makes sense of the entire situation. Greasus Goldtooth is a creation of the Empire and the colleges of magic. And all of what's happened to the ogre tribes is arguably the worst news that Cathay could ever have. Because Greasus, if he binds them together and can somehow break what happened to them again, could turn them into a true force to be reckoned with. It's already happened. He's got at least 60 years worth of rule if we have no end times ahead of him. And in that time, he's going to get more powerful and stronger. Right now, astromancers are probably bricking it in Cathay, going, shit's going down, man. It's going to go wrong over there. Zhao Ming, by comparison, appears to be charmed. And there's Empire wizards all over the place in his city. There's some shit going down. There is quite clearly some form of plot. There's a story. There's a novel in here. And that novel is basically spy politics are going down. And the whole thing is much bigger and more political than it first looks like. You could just go, oh, he's just got a magic item. And that is what Fantasy Battle as a battle game does. They don't really care how it comes about. But when it comes to the stories and building cool stories for Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or for novels, there is not just a wealth of material. It's a wealth of material that's written in black and white. It's extremely clear what the Empire is doing down here. And it appears to be entirely purposeful. And that's cool. Greasus Goldtooth tells a story that is super awesome, particularly because he is now so capable, he's almost certainly moved beyond the control that the Empire could ever have. He is going to become a terror in that area. And it's one of the reasons why the End Times is so dearly hated by many people out there, because stories like this are cut. They're gone. They don't matter. And his end ignominiously shows this, where he is left as a small, tiny sentence in the back of a book saying, oh, and he was killed by a Black Orc. Yep. And that's his end times.
Yeah, because we leave him in 2521 of the Firemouth erupting, and Greasus is saying, we're going to war.
Yeah.
And that's it. And
that's it. And it's so deeply depressing because Greasus Goldtooth is a character that potentially has such an amazing novel that could be attached to it, explaining both his genesis and also how he's a lot more complicated than it first appears, how the ogres themselves are much more complicated, and possibly, if you really wanted to tell a tale, how the very crown itself is allowing him to bring ogres into a place of greater sensibility. After all, the story says this, all the tyrants came to him, listened to his plan, and I quote, said, good plan. Ogres don't do that. That's not the ogre way of doing battle. It's to be fervently upset about what happened at the Firemouth, charge up there, kill everything. That's pretty easy, yeah? Not, oh, yeah, let's organize this way. Let's go out to our individual tribes, get all the big guys, move them over there. Let's get them all working together. The amount of planning required for that is far beyond what most ogres do. Now, yes, individual ogres can be super clever. And by super clever, I mean base human standard. But they can be super capable. And lots of them are. Go back to our Maneater stream, when Godfag Maneater, and discussing him. He's a pretty bright ogre and his many cunning plans. But normally they're not. And Greasus really isn't. But he isn't for magical reasons. So if you're thinking of this character, I would suggest that this is probably one of the most consequential characters that the Ogre Kingdoms have. not because he individually is clever and has done things, but because he could be the starting point of taking the entirety of the Ogre Kingdoms in a completely different direction, and one that would leave Cathay possibly begging on its knees, the very reason the Maw was brought about into existence in the first place. Assuming that the Celestial Dragon Emperor isn't an idiot, this was all planned. Stymieing the ogres and turning them into a great barrier on one of their borders was planned. Making them effectively monsters was their plan. And here is an ogre who isn't. And makes the ogres around him work.
Yeah.
And that's awesome.
Yeah, especially, I know a lot of people have been looking for what could be the various narratives of Grand Cathay in the end times. This would be the Western theater narrative.
I think it would be brilliant.
It would be the revenge of the ogres. But but with everything going on with Zhao Ming, it makes him have a very, what is Zhao Ming gonna do? And the answer would be, it's gonna be really complicated.
Yeah, and complication is great for stories. This is where the Western theatre for Cathay breaks. And we have greenskins, we have chaos coming down, we have a proper mess, and Greasus almost certainly dominating that entire field, because he is an agent of small c chaos as far as everyone's concerned. Ogres are terrifyingly capable. They walk over almost everything that they are marshaled against, assuming there's anything resembling good tactics behind them. And that's what he brings.
Yep. A couple of last quick little things. Singemeister, thank you for the super chat. That's right. Great King Lord Beezer is the Noblar that served Greasus.
Thanks for getting that one.
Yeah, now the funny, so I'll leave y'all with two little fun things about Greasus. Something that Total War added that there was no explanation for, but it got approved. But it's very interesting, and it adds some fun little things. Is that Greasus actually has heterochromia in Total War, where he has one kind of like blue eye and his other eye is like red. He's got almost like a little weird mutation, which is fun. The second thing is that, so Great King Lord Beezer was the great almighty powerful Noblar that ruled over 2.5 tribes of Noblars and was a very clever, scheming little guy. Unfortunately, he didn't meet his death in relatively recent years, when one night, as he was cleaning out the bowl that Greasus apparently uses to shit in, Greasus stumbled in one night, drunk off his ass, fell over, tripped, and landed on Great King Lord Beezer, sadly ending his life.
Poor Great King Lord Beezer. Funny. So yeah, I love Greasus, which is why to this day I will never be happy with the Total War model, which I think is a joke model. Some of the art around it's lovely, but it could have been so much more powerful.
If they were going to put him on a device, I wish they had given him the big throne thing that he's on in the artwork. Because that I could have lived with that. Where it's like this very opulent, crazy thing. Hopefully, it's not impossible. They might redo him one day. They've redone some characters in the past. So it's one of those things that if you can, keep asking for it. The current VP, the current vice president of Total War, has an open email where he encourages anyone and everyone to message him about any thoughts they have about the game. Feel free to message him about Greasus. Genuinely.
Because it's awful. Greasus is awesome. His model is awful.
Yeah, he got done dirty. He got done dirty in a lot of ways. Yes, there are some very, very good mods that give him a great model. That is true. But It should be in the base game.
Should be. Right, other than that, thanks all. That was awesome. Thank you. I love Greasus. He's
great. Yeah, he's awesome. Fantastic character.
Oh, thank you very much for that character, Darius, because without you, we would not have done that just now. You rock, and happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Darius. Happy birthday to you.
Yes, and thank you all very, very much for the support today. And so are you flying this Tuesday or next Tuesday?
This Tuesday I'm flying. So I won't be available on the Tuesday, but I will be next Saturday, Sunday, assuming we can get it all to work.
Yeah, I will be here this Tuesday doing something, but Andy will not be here, and we'll run with what we got. Greasus, the mayor of Titty City.
Sure.
And with that, thank you all so much for watching.
Get out of here fast.
we're gonna get out of here. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.